Recording in progress.
Nikhil,
Yep.
it's Michelle. Do you see Joe Vayuso here?
He was here.
Yep.
Oh, he was? Okay.
He's on the phone.
Okay.
All right, Chuck, we're at 7. We have quorum.
Okay, then we will call this meeting of the Branford Planning and Zoning Commission to order. It is Thursday, February 5th at 7 p.m. We'll start by introducing members of the commission and staff. Commission member Joe Chadwick. Joe, are you here?
Joe Chadwick is present.
Thank you, Joe. Commission member Fred Russo. Fred, are you here?
Fred Russo is here.
Thank you, Fred. Commission member Joe Vayuso. Joe, are you here?
Joe Vayuso, present.
Thank you, Joe. Commission member Marcy Pelusi. Marcy, are you here?
Marcy Pelusi's here.
Thank you, Marcy. Commission member Sharon Hutner. Sharon, are you here?
Sharon Hutner is here.
Thank you, Sharon. And our staff this evening is our town planner, McKeel Wackers. McKeel, you're here.
Yep, present.
And our assistant planner, Dan Robinson. Dan, you're here.
I'm here.
Thank you, Dan. And our clerk recording secretary is Michelle Martin, who is lurking in the background. And I am Chuck Anders, chair, and I'll start by asking our secretary, Fred Russo, to read the notice of public hearing.
Legal notice, Town of Branford. The Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Branford, Connecticut hereby gives notice of public hearings to be held on Thursday, February 5th, 2026 at 7 p.m. by remote technology to consider applications listed below. Information regarding how to participate in the public hearings will be provided on the Commission's meeting agenda that will be posted on the town's website at least 24 hours prior to the meeting. Application 25-19, zoning regulation application for revisions to the landscaping regulations, section 6.3. Planning and Zoning Commission, C. Andres, chairman, applicant. Application 25-14, special exception and coastal site plan for the demo of the existing home and the construction of a new single-family home located at 55 Harding Avenue. Mark Fafard, applicant and owner. Application 26-3, special exception for grading, section 6.8, for a residential development located at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 11, 15, 17, Beacon Hill Road, Beacon Hill Properties, LLC, in care of Paul Santa Barbara, applicant and owner. And application 25-7, special exception and coastal site plan for a new single-family home and accessory apartment located at 10 Montgomery Parkway, John Wolfenden, applicant. At said hearings, all persons will have the right to be heard. Copies are on file in the Planning and Zoning Commission's office at the Planning and Zoning Department, 1019 Main Street, Branford, Connecticut, 06405. Written communications may be sent to the above address or to planning and zoning at branford-ct.gov. Branford Planning and Zoning Commission, C. Andres, chairperson.
Chair, thank you, Fred. We'll follow our normal format for public hearings, which is that the applicant goes first, makes his presentation, including the applicant, any of its consultants. After the applicant makes his presentation, we turn it over to the commission and staff, typically hear a summary of a staff report, open up for questions, comments from commission members and staff. After that, we come to the public portion and we ask that you state your name and address for the record, and you make your comments. When that's done, and I'm going to tell you in a moment how to do that, how to work the Zoom magic, ask the staff to go through that. And then after the public portion, we allow the applicant to respond to any of the public portion. There may be further questions from commission members and staff, and we may or may not continue the public hearing, continue how it goes. So that's the general format. We do have I think a number of public hearings this evening that, this may be a longer than normal meeting, but I think the agenda has been posted in the chat, so you can see where you are. The matter that you're interested in. And with that, I will ask McKeel or Dan to review the process for participating in the public hearing.
Yep. So McKeel Wackers, a town planner. So if you want to participate in the public hearing and you wish to speak, if you're using a computer with a microphone, click raise your hand in the participant window. If you're calling in by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. Dial-in information is listed on the agenda. If you don't wish to speak, you may submit comments using the chat feature. We will monitor chat the best we can, but speaking is preferred. A reminder, if you wish to speak or add a message in the chat, please provide your name as required by Public Act 22-3. And all details are available on the agenda.
Chuck Candace, Chair. Thank you, McKeel. So we'll start with items number 1 and 2 because they concern the same property, same applicant and property on our agenda, and that is Paul Santa Barbara, care of Beacon Hill Property LLC, applicant and owner. And the address is 12345-679-1115-17 Beacon Hill Road. The first one is a special exception coastal site plan application. This is for a 22-unit housing development. And the second one is a special exception for grading. We opened this public hearing, I believe, at our January 8th meeting, and then it was continued to this meeting, and I think we added the special exception for grading. So that we've heard some about what this is about. Is the applicant ready to proceed?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Attorney Timothy Lee, address of 107 Monowee Street in Branford. I represent Paul Santa Barbara, who is the principal of Beacon Hill Properties and the owner of the various properties. As the chair referenced, we did make a pretty substantial presentation to you at the first January meeting. By way of refresher, it is a 22-unit, age-restricted, 55 and over housing development that is going to replace a previously approved 10-lot subdivision at the property. During the course of the presentation last month, we had made the presentation. McKeel had gone through his reports. There were a couple housekeeping items that we needed to supplement the application with, which I think we have. Including a lighting plan that was submitted just prior to the meeting. I also provided a certification regarding that tracks the language of your regulation regarding compliance with the age-restricted housing requirement. And probably most significantly, at the end of the meeting last time, the chair had brought up the fact that this application involved a significant amount of site work and that the applicant should also submit a special exception application pursuant to section 6.8 of your regulations. So since the time of the meeting in January, we submitted the special exception application. So as noted in the reading of the agenda, the application actually involves 2 special exceptions. One is a special exception pursuant to section 7.2 of the regulations to allow the 22 age-restricted housing units, and the other is a special exception pursuant to section 6.8 of the regulations that allows the site activity to go on, which will ultimately end up in the 22-unit development. I do have our project engineer, Romeo Valentin from Juliana Associates. He's present on the call if the commission wants to hear from him regarding the nature of the site work. I'm happy to have Romeo run through that with you. By way of background, we did have to go to the Wetlands Commission for this, and we made a full presentation over many, many months with the Wetlands Commission that shows the amount of the earth activity that was going to go on for this development. I had Romeo put together calculations, and there is going to be a significant amount of earth activity on the site. according to his calculations, there's going to be, and this is a measurement in cubic feet, 593,000 material cut from the site, and then 404,000 cubic feet of fill at the site, which will result in a significant amount of fill leaving the site. So if the commission wants to hear about that, I'm happy to have Romeo come on and discuss how that site plan is, or that work is going to be achieved.
Maybe we can also do that just quickly, if he could.
Romeo, if you can pop, I see he's on the list of attendees. I don't know if he's been promoted to be able to speak.
He has co-host. You can share.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, I will. Okay. Can you see this screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So, bring you here first. This is our cut fill analysis. If you look here, that's the orientation. We've got Rose Hill Road here, and then Beacon Hill here. We've got 2 buildings here, 3 here, and 1 here. So if we go to our cut fill analysis, the red is the cut, and then the blue is the fill. So as Tim stated, we have significant numbers. However, make it simple. The cut volume is 21,000 cubic yards. Fill 14, almost 15,000 cubic yards. And then our extra material will be 6,978 cubic yards. And then if we are calculating 18-yard triaxle or trailer dump trucks, that's going to come out to 388 truckloads over a span of 3 to 5 years. So anything that gets cut and doesn't be put here will be taken off site. And that's all I have. If you have any questions in particular, I can go through it more specifically.
Mr. Lee, just a question. We had previously approved an open space subdivision for this proposal. Is the amount of cut and fill similar to what was proposed in that application, if you're aware?
That you're right. We had that discussion last time in terms of this property was a subject of an open space subdivision probably about 10 plus years ago, maybe a little bit longer. And that development ultimately proved not to be feasible to construct. So the owner of the property kind of went back to the drawing board with this plan. To specifically answer your question, I don't know how much fill that application had relative to this application.
Street layout looks similar, I think. And the building locations seem roughly the same. Well, roughly the same areas. So I was wondering if it was similar. So, okay.
I don't, as we touched, one of the benefits of this application is that our plan and a requirement of this application is that we connect to the sewer system that's going to be constructed in that area. And my client's willing to make a significant contribution towards the development of that sewer system. So from my client's perspective, the existence of sewers or the proposed sewers in this location really is what's driving this development in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Do you have anything else at this time?
I don't. I heard from my client who's basically confirmed your recollection that the road is virtually identical to where the road was proposed back in 2011.
Thank you.
For the 10-lot subdivision.
At this point, McKeel, do you have any, I know you probably went over your staff reports sometime. Do you have any supplements or updates you'd like to review this?
Yeah, let me go through it. I'll go to the conditions. So, sorry. So the findings have been updated. originally I had the special exception that if the commission wants to approve it, they can make a finding that it complies with the special exception requirements. There's also a requirement here that a finding about the sewer, that a final agreement still needs to be secured. And then there's a finding here about the open space. Since the open space for the previous development that did not go forward was already transferred to the town. The applicant was seeking to have that credited towards this application in order to fulfill the open space requirements. That open space is actually being augmented with another section of open space. So the town actually comes away with a net increase in open space overall. And then finally, there's a finding to determine that the grading would be compliant with the special exception criteria. Then the conditions associated with this that are proposed, well, first and foremost is that prior to any building permit, all records and approvals and deeds associated with the previous open space subdivision that conflict with this proposed 22-unit restricted development need to be formally modified, replaced, or released as necessary. We're also seeking that they institute erosion control measures, and we have our standard erosion control condition there. Because of the sewer service does not have a final agreement, we want a condition that no building permit and no site clearing, grading, or land disturbing or construction related to this activity commence without a final sewer agreement. The one item that is new that was not covered last month was about the pickleball court. There was discussion with the commission, but this is a new condition in order to reflect that. One is really to address the noise mitigation, to provide some sort of barrier or landscaping as a buffer, which still would need to be designed and approved by staff. Also signage restricting it to the use only during daylight hours, and to not allow the course to be illuminated in order to minimize, we have noise ordinances that have a much lower noise threshold in evening hours, but we do have higher thresholds during the daytime, and I think that might address, in part, the performance of and the generation of noise. And then finally, just our standard language around exterior lighting, making sure they're properly shielded, and correct lumen and Kelvin requirements. So that's compliant with 6.7. And that would just be a condition moving forward as lighting, as bulbs are changed or as lighting fixtures change, just to ensure that is tied to the property. And that is all the findings and conditions I have.
Chuck Indus here. Thank you, McKeel. Mr. Lee, did we determine who's getting the open space?
We have not. Our preference would be to give it to the town because the town owns some of the adjoining open space. But I don't have an agreement from the town to accept the open space yet. But
Okay,
that is our first. Our first choice would be to have it go to the town.
The portion of the open space that was already deeded as part of the earlier subdivision, is the town the beneficiary of that open space?
Correct.
Okay. Is this contiguous to it, or is it a different area? Or
it's a little bit of a different area, but it's also contiguous to other town-owned property.
Okay. Have you had any discussions with the town?
No, my client reminded me yesterday to try to identify who's going to take the open space, and I put a call into Bill Anaskovich as the contact, but I have not confirmed with him.
Okay. Assume that there is some basis for the town would be willing to do it because it accepted the initial portion and it owns contiguous land. Is that the thinking?
That was the thinking.
Okay.
And if not, we'll offer it to the land trust.
Right. Okay. Mikhail, we probably need to add a condition about that we need to approve the recipient of the open space. And ideally it's the town or the land trust. I mean, it could maybe be a homeowners association. That's bottom of the list. We'd much rather have the town or the land trust.
So would the association. Would
Right.
prefer to have the town or the land trust on it.
Right. Okay. Are there questions, comments from commission members or staff before we open it up to the public? Sharon.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm sorry I didn't notice this before, but I'm wondering why, if there are 55 parking spaces that are required, why they're providing 98 spaces. That would double the amount of impervious surfaces in this development, which might affect stormwater management or drain off or flooding or whatever in the future. So I'm just wondering why that was decided.
Sure. So in the calculation of the 98 parking spaces, that includes the 2 parking spaces within the garage. So each unit is going to come with a 2-car garage. So 2 of the parking spaces are in the garage, and then 2 of the parking spaces are basically the driveway entrance into the garage. So it's not going to result in an increase in impervious surface because you're going to need the driveway into the garage anyway. But that driveway can accommodate 2 cars in the garage and then 2 cars in the driveway leading to the garage.
Okay. All
And
right.
then there's some community spaces up by the pickleball court for guests and.
Right. Well, hopefully in the community spaces, you can use other kind of construction materials like pervious pavers and things like that. That would really help in
Okay.
terms of the percentage of impervious surfaces.
I will
Thank you.
pass the word along. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Other questions and comments from commission members before we open up to the public? Hearing none, let's open up to the public. Do any members of the public have any comments on this application, on these applications? There's 2 of them. One more time, any member of the public wish to comment? Nikhil or Dan, do you see anybody?
I don't know how to do this. Chuck, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excuse me, Mr. Sherman. Minor question. I don't know about the elevations, but is the height of the units that are farthest up on the ridge going to be above the ridge line?
And can you just identify yourself for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is Anthony White. I live on Helen Road, 21 Helen Road in Branford.
Thank you.
So my question is the peak of those units that are back in the back part, will that be above what is currently the ridge line of the Beacon Hill property behind it? Have we got elevations on that yet?
Mr. Lee, can you address that?
Well, I'm going to have to defer to somebody else on the team to
Sure.
address. Romeo, if you could tell me the elevations on on those back houses, and I can get the height on those back on those units.
I will have to look through my plans really quick to find that. Give me one moment.
While we're waiting, we'll see if, are there any other members of the public that had any comments or that wish to speak? Keel or Dan, do you see anyone?
Do not.
Okay.
No hands raised.
Okay, so this is Romeo Valentin from Giuliano Associates. All right, based on what I'm seeing right now, again, I'm doing this really quickly. So if I have a 35-foot house and my finished floor is at 101, I'm looking at 136 for an elevation at the peak of the house, And as far as my contours show, I'm looking at 106, 108. Okay, so 116 is my highest point behind the back 3 units, building 5, 6, and 7. So it does look like the buildings are, the peak of the building is slightly higher than the highest elevation that we show at the rear of those lots.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Valentin. Mr. White, did you have any other questions?
Nope, that was it. Just wondered what I'm going to look at when it's built.
Okay, thank you. Well, one more time, anyone else, any member of the public have any comments? Hearing none, then I think we can close items number 1 and 2 as a public hearing. Depending on how we go this evening, we may be able to take this up later. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you very much.
That brings us then to item number 3, which is Gregory Boz, applicant and owner, 42 Silver Street. This is a special exception for the construction of a 2-family home in the rear of a parcel and a second-floor addition above an existing garage for a dwelling unit. This is a matter that we opened at our last meeting on January 22nd, and I think Mr. Preddy explained it. There are some questions and comments from staff and the public relating to things. I think parking was an issue. It's concerned that Silver Street, fairly narrow street, and that the existing parking spaces out front, the cars somewhat intrude on that, and seeing if the applicant could put more on-street, on the lot, on-site parking. And then I think there was a landscaping issue, and then a number of neighbors had raised some drainage issues. I think there was, but you do have your wetlands approval. I know that was mentioned as well. So, Mr. Preddy, you ready to proceed?
Yes. Good evening, Jim Preddy, Criscola Engineering, 420 East Main Street in Branford, representing Greg Bozzi. Chuck, you kind of hit the points. We did present this at the January meeting. We had been through a number of wetland meetings, WPCA approval, Zoning Board of Appeals approval, before we got to this board. The outstanding items, I think you correctly numbered. There was concern about the parking that's at the front edge of the property, that's kind of half on the street, half on the property. We agreed to remove that and add a few spaces. I should share my screen. You're seeing the map, I hope.
Yes.
So we agreed to remove that pavement along the front of the property here and add a few spaces, off the existing driveway here. As far as the landscaping, we did add the landscaping around the building here. We're clearly more than 40%. We're about 70% of the building circumference. In addition, as one of the outstanding requirements from the Wetland Commission, we did also provide a detail for the rain garden, which is, here, where we list the type and number of plants and spacing for the various areas in the key here. The question that came up about drainage, I believe, so this is the property here. This is the existing house, and this is the existing garage. The assessor actually has the property line wrong. The property line for 42 goes behind the buildings like this and kind of follows a stone wall. If you can see these contours, this is sort of a high point here. This whole lot drains toward this wetland up to the west corner of this picture here. But if you could see down here, and I could put the GIS up, but the house for 30 is just off under where it says 0.5 acres. And you can see most of the contours and from that property head toward where that house is. So I don't doubt that they have some drainage issues, but none of the water from, you can see these contours. There's a high point here, and this all runs down toward this wetland, and some of this runs down toward the front. But this high point here, that's right behind the garage, this Big Rock Knoll, is mostly on the other property. So there's no way we could drain up and over it onto the other property. The other thing was, I guess, that's a huge deal, but on these elevations, I did have the architect send me a new drawing. They added some very small canopies over the door just to keep the rain off the door. But that's so that's where we're at since the last meeting.
Okay, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Preddy. I think on the parking, I think you are there. How many spaces are on the site now?
So here, so I have it enumerated here. We need 11 total, and we have 12 now. Counting the 3 inside the garage.
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting this pavement here will be coming out, and we'll be taking a little part of the curb wall that's on this side, and there's actually a little break right here. It kind of works out, but and it's not very tall on this side, so they'll be with very little fill. He'll be able to put in some spots to come off of this driveway, and we could remove that. I think that was it from the last meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Preddy. McKeel, do you want to summarize any supplements or additions to your report?
Sure. So just to review the findings in light of the changes that were made. Just the first finding is that if you determine that you want to move forward with approving this, there's a finding that it complies with the special exception criteria, and that it satisfies the streetscape landscaping requirements, and the existing driveways legal non-conforming according to the zoning regulations. We have our standard erosion control conditions. He articulated the parking requirements, so this condition is likely no longer needed. And then we wanted to see more information about the stormwater management, about how it runs off the property. That's a condition that we can still consider and have staff review it. But if you feel that what was presented tonight, we can reevaluate whether that's needed for this application. And then finally, we have our standard lighting, exterior lighting requirements to make sure they're compliant with 6.7 of the zoning regulations. And those are the findings and conditions as they currently presented. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, McKeel. I would ask that we're going to get to the public portion shortly, but that you do not use the chat for substantive comments to me if you have a procedural question. The idea is that we want to give full attention to the speaker, whether it's staff or the public or anyone else. And if someone's writing stuffing in the chat while someone else is speaking, it interrupts and it's a little bit rude. So you will have a chance to speak publicly, and we ask that you do it that way, and also make sure that it's in the record, because if something in the chat may not even be in the record. So just that as a note. Are there questions and comments from commission members or staff before we open it up to the public? Hearing none, then let's go ahead and open it up for public comment. McKeel and Dan, who's
one hand raised.
Okay. Patrizia Alexi, I think
Patrizia.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. Let's see, my name is Patrizia Fiore. The name is incorrect on my little thing here. I live at 30 Silver Street, which is directly adjacent to this proposed development at 42. I would actually like to begin by addressing what I deemed to be inadequate notification process, which is permitted by this committee. We were supposed to receive certified mail of this project. However, none of us received certified mail. I went to the town planning and zoning and I received a form which showed we had all received certified mail. So if it was just me, I'd understand. But since it seems to be the entire neighborhood, that is quite concerning. So let's see. Let me just see here. Oh, here it is. I am contesting this application based on serious and permanent public safety risks. Under Branford Town Code, subsection 288-18J, a permanent dead-end street shall not serve more than 6 lots per side, a total of 12 lots. Our street already serves 12 existing lots. Can I actually share my screen if possible?
Yeah, Chair, we can't hear you.
Yes, I certainly, the members of the public can share the screen if they like. I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
I think they have co-host.
Okay. So as you see here, we have 21 lots already on this extremely tight street, which only has an entrance of 17 feet. So that's a 75% increase over the town's safety threshold, which creates a potential lethal bottleneck during any sort of evacuation process. The entry onto Silver Street measures 17 feet, which is already below the 20 feet required for safe two-way passage by emergency vehicles. The proposed private driveway serving the new development is even narrower at just 11 feet, which may even be shortened by these additional parking spots. I'm not quite sure. This directly violates Branford Fire Zone Code Section 157-1, which requires that all fire access areas be sufficient in size for emergency equipment. 11-foot drive is physically incapable of supporting a Branford ladder truck, which requires 20 feet for safe outrigging stabilization. To put it in perspective, 11 feet is narrower than a single parking space. When a car is parked or even trash bins out on the curb, that usable length then drops to about 7 to 8 feet, making it impossible for fire trucks or ambulances to reach that home. Here. This is the width of the driveway. This is the grade of the driveway. And this, I'm assuming, is where the proposed additional parking is supposed to go. So I'm not sure how that's going to fix that parking there. And you can see during these snowy times in Branford, this street then becomes even more tight. And as you see, the current residents park in such a manner that their cars project past the telephone poles, creating an even tighter road. Even with a small mail truck, the road is virtually impervious without having to go up on the sidewalk. This is not a zoning preference. It is a public safety issue. Under 830G, the commission is required to uphold substantial public interests such as fire and life safety, which are being disregarded here in favor of density. Furthermore, section 4.03.K requires a 120-foot diameter turnaround for any private dead end access. This plan provides for none. You are effectively creating a dead end off of a dead end. If a fire or medical emergency occurred at one of these properties, emergency vehicles would have to reverse the entire length of the drive and go down an 11-foot width parking driveway down into an overcapacity 7-foot road, which is serving 21 homes. As you can see here, we were trapped in our homes for 2 hours because we couldn't get in or out because of this public safety issue. Without evidence demonstrating that emergency vehicles can maneuver safely without blocking access to the other homes, this commission lacks the sufficient information to ensure the safety and viability of this proposal. The reality is clear. 21 families share one exit accessed by a 17-foot road. Bottleneck possesses a substantial and unresolvable safety risk unless this plan is entirely redesigned. I respectfully ask the commission to deny this application under the safety provisions that I have just listed. Please include the lot count and the code citations that I have mentioned for the permanent record. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fiore.
Mhm.
Mikkel and Dan, are there other members of the public that wish to comment?
I see no hands raised.
Okay, I guess, Ms. Fiore, you can end your screen share for this.
I thought I did. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
It's gone. It's gone now.
Okay, great. Is there anyone else? You don't see anyone else?
No raised hands.
Okay. Okay. I guess let's, Ms. Preddy, I heard 3 issues raised. One was about a notice issue, about where the notices were sent to all the adjacent property owners. There is a question about there's a safety issue. I think she took that out of the subdivision code, which is we're not.
Well, I'm sorry. That's the only place that you guys have for public safety.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Ms. Fiore. I think we're gonna. I'll close the public portion for now. So I appreciate your comments, but that's that. I'm just going to see if Mr. Preddy wants to respond. We had the notice issue, the dead end street, 21 houses on a dead end street, and presenting public safety, and then I think the narrowness of the driveway, fire code issues, were those were my understanding of the emergency vehicles getting the narrow street itself, and then particularly the driveway. So, Mr. Preddy, do you want to address any of those?
Yes, I'll, a couple of things. The mailings were required to provide proof that they were sent by the post office based on the list that the town has for addresses, mailing addresses for the adjoining properties within 100 feet, which we have done. The town, Mike Gill has the post office notification form in the file. The 12 lots, I don't disagree with that. There is typically only 12 lots allowed on a dead end. We're not creating another lot here. We're adding a building, but we're not creating a lot. There's already too many lots. There was a comment about 11 feet is narrower than a parking space. A typical parking space is 9 feet wide. There was a comment about 830G. This is not an 830G at this point application. The public safety during the fire, I mean, whether this structure is there or not, that road would have looked like that regardless. There was a fire last week up at the top of the hill, and the fire department did whatever they had to do to get in and put the fire out. So temporarily the road was blocked. And as far as the length or the turnaround, there is no requirement for a cul-de-sac at the end of a private driveway that I'm aware of. There is room to turn a vehicle around at the top of the driveway, but there's not like a big round cul-de-sac that you would typically see on a town road. And also the length of the driveway does not exceed what's typically maximum required for, say, an interior lot in town. So I think that was all the comments that I heard.
Mr. Preddy, I think I don't know the fire code. I mean, I know we don't enforce it. We're the zoning commission, but do you know, is there a minimum length of the driveway? I think that was one of the suggestions, that 11 feet can't get a fire truck up on the driveway, and these that you're putting a new building, two family buildings in the back there. I mean, do you know anything about that? And frankly, I don't know to what extent the fire marshal has looked at this at this point. Or do you know?
So I believe that the way the process works now, that this goes through all the departments, and I haven't gotten any negative comments from the fire marshal. So there's that, but I don't know if you recall when we did the building at 640 Main Street, there was a narrow part of the driveway there, and the fire marshal commented that as long as it was 9 feet wide, he could get back there. And so this driveway is 11 feet wide, and it also says about having, above the ground, cleared width, which is there. There's not like trees encroaching on the driveway and that sort of thing. So, but yeah, as far as I know, that this has gone through all the departments, and I haven't heard any negative comments from the fire marshal.
Thank you, Mr. Preddy. McKeel, can you address some of the issues that was made that Ms. Fiore was discussing?
So in terms of comments, in the staff memo, there were 3 comments from 3 other departments. The fire marshal did send a response. His statement on January 13th was preliminary full review to be completed by building permits is obtained for compliance under the fire codes. These structures are under 3 units, they're 3 units or less. The more stringent fire requirements kick in at 4 units or more when they're in a structure. The town engineer, who also handles sort of sight lines for traffic and other traffic concerns, responded and really only commented on the sewer access, that they received approval from the WPCA in August, and they made no comments about the traffic or the status of the road. And then the building official also commented just to require that they apply for a building permit after getting zoning approval. Did I miss anything? Was there anything else you wanted me to touch on?
No, there were some questions about the length of dead-end streets and the fact that, the suggestion was this is a safety issue already, and you put more dwelling units, you're with only one access way, then it's even more dangerous. I mean, that was my reading of what her claim was. Yeah,
there is, when you're creating new dead-end streets, there is a lot requirement, but this is not this is not a subdivision. We're not creating public infrastructure. This is using existing infrastructure, and it's allowed by a special exception. And again, this is a special exception, so the commission has the right to consider their criteria and make a determination based on that for the
Okay, thanks, McKeel. Questions, comments from commission members? Anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, are there?
Hi.
Yes, who?
I have my hand up.
Okay, we'll let you.
Do I only get one chance to talk?
Go ahead. Yes, yeah,
okay.
you really.
I really only do get one chance.
I'm going to be nice and let you talk again. You have some follow up? Yeah.
Well, yeah. First, I would like to address the idea that adding 3 additional families onto this street is not a safety hazard. It does not put the rest of this entire neighborhood and all of the residents that live here at danger. So it really is a bit offensive when somebody who works for an engineering company tells us that we don't need to worry about danger and whether or not these people were here would still be a hazard. That's a bit insulting, number 1. Number 2, our safety supersedes and this is why I brought up 8-30G, because it even supersedes 8-30G, which normally gives the town a very broad spectrum as to what they can allow for building. So, unfortunately, if this town wants to bury public safety in subsection chapters, disregarding the safety of the residents, this may need to be adjudicated by a higher magistrate. Because I'm not going to allow these people, my children and the children that live on this street, to be in danger because somebody needs to excessively build on a lot which A, cannot be accessed by emergency vehicles, and B, causes a threat to the rest of this street. So yes, I definitely will be requiring additional magistrate assistance if this does go any further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fiore. Mr. Preddy, do you have any further comments?
No, I do not.
Okay. And does any other commission member have any comments? Commission member, staff? Okay, hearing none, then we'll close this matter as a public hearing. And then depending on how tonight goes, we may talk about this later on. We have some other things on the application. If not, we'll talk about it at a future meeting. So thank you, everyone. Okay, so that brings us then to item number 4, which is it's the landscape regulation proposal. The applicant is the Planning and Zoning Commission, and it's the zoning regulation application to revise the landscaping regulation section 6.3. And this has a long history of us trying to tackle the landscaping and various committees and so forth. And I think we're getting closer. We had a whole hearing, a whole process last year that kind of went through, and then we started again, and then we formed a subcommittee. I think it was mainly Peter Henschel, Marcy, and McKeel, the team appointed to come up with the latest round. And I know there were some comments from commission members. I think Joe had some that were helpful on an earlier draft. So here we are. We're going forward. McKeel, who are you going to be presenting this, or how's this going to work?
Correct. I'll go through a presentation and ask Marcy and Peter to chime in. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I'm McKeel Wackers, town planner, and I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go through this presentation as quick as possible to respect everyone's time. We did do a presentation about this in October, so this is not entirely new, at least for the commission. So we're looking at section 6.3 of the zoning regulations. This is section 6, which talks about the basic standards that apply to most applications that come in. This is a really quick summary of what we're going to cover in these new regulations, or the new outline you see there on the right. Purpose, applicability, limits of disturbance, the general landscaping requirements, and so on. You've all looked at the text. I'm not going to go through the text by a fine-tooth comb. I'm trying to hit the high points and probably cover what, the limits of disturbance and how it might impact on an actual project, which is, I think, what's most important. But in coming into this process, yeah, there was a lot of work done for the previous 2 years. Took a look at what was previously done and sort of came away with 4 conclusions and what was trying to be accomplished. One is to control the extent of clearance, so the removal of trees and vegetation from a property when a project is being considered or undertaken. What is going to be replaced? Like, how many trees would replace trees that are lost? What type of vegetation will replace what is removed? And then we want to encourage and require native species, and we want to require and discourage invasive species. And then the really 3 principles in order to take those 4 overriding elements. We want to make sure it's clear about what's required. We want to make sure the requirements are measurable so that someone can understand clearly, okay, I need to provide X in order to be compliant. And then make sure the compliance is fairly straightforward. So next. This is something that's very much supported by the Plan of Conservation and Development. When we undertake zoning text amendments, it needs to be comply with our POCD, and it helps to preserve and enhance Branford scenic features, helps protect important natural resources, and also enhance community character. So I have 2 slides here that sort of shows what old and new. I went in, did depth in an October meeting. On the left-hand side, we have the old, and I put in text really what was the measurable standards that was required. Many of the sections sort of were more aspirational and didn't have measurable requirements to take away. What you'll notice here is that each of these statements, you start to see it clarified in terms of what you need to do in order to achieve the requirements under those sections. So limits of disturbance. We have, and I'll show you in this example in the next slide. You need to be 20 feet. You can clear property within 25 feet of the proposed building footprint. If it's under 5,000 square feet, and if it's a larger building, then the distance that you're allowed to clear is up to 45 feet from the building footprint. You can also clear, obviously the areas for parking and driveways and similar infrastructure, and then also 10 feet around that. You can clear 20 feet from any proposed public sanitary or storm sewers. And then for private stormwater infrastructure, you can clear the area that's required plus 10 feet around that infrastructure. And then finally, we have sort of all other improvements necessary, which could be site grading and allowing a 10-foot buffer around that. So these are all the elements you will typically see within a project. And now instead of, what this will ultimately do is prevent a lot from being clear cut and having too much natural vegetation removed. The landscaping requirements also 75% of the inventory that needs to be planted and needs to be native species. And it includes native cultivars and other elements of that native, category. And Marcy is much more, can probably speak to that better. We're also requiring a 1-for-1 replacement for every tree that is significant tree that is cut down, up to a maximum of 30 trees per acre. And I'll show you how that will apply in a little bit. And then we're really trying to focus on landscaping that's visible from the right of way. That what the public sees as they go by a property is really what we want to focus on and make sure that that is treated correctly. And then we put some guidelines together, what needs to be done in industrial, commercial, mixed-use settings, suburban, residential, and rural settings, and what the goal is for landscaping. And in each of these settings, they're different. In industrial, you're really looking to try and screen and buffer the uses. And then for when you get into commercial and the mixed use it's really about sort of helping to articulate where entrances are and to help funnel people where they need to go on the property between parking to the front entrance and other such features of the property. And then suburban residential, it's about privacy and other beautification that would be important. The frontage, we require 1 canopy tree per 50 feet of frontage. Parking area requirements, we require 1.5 trees per 10 parking spaces. And then every row with 15 parking spaces, we need a break of some sort, either an island or a bump out. We create standards for screening. The screening that could be required around utility infrastructure, but also screening for privacy or where residential districts abut in non-residential districts. Stormwater sewer structure, the one aspect here is that we actually require more native at 85%. Because stormwater infrastructure is actually more sensitive. Greenbelt buffer, which I just mentioned, 7.5-foot buffer between non-residential districts and residential districts. Landscaping is required. The plan needs to be done by a professional. We also list what elements they need to show on that plan. And then modifications, we're proposing if it is problematic to comply with the regulations, there are some ways to address those through some modifications. One is if there's opportunities to provide a conservation easement over natural habitat that might still exist on the property, or a fee in lieu of option that can be used to compensate for what cannot be provided. And then finally, there's a two-year survival requirement when you are doing installation and completion. And then there's also ongoing maintenance and enforcement requirements after the project is done. I will say the regulations were reviewed by the town attorney and he's very comfortable with in the form that it is currently. All right, so now I'm going to try and show you what this would actually look like in practice. This is a project that I think most people might be familiar with. It's 675 East Main Street. It was I think the Holiday Inn or Days Inn. And it was a large property with existing structures, but also a large section of natural habitat. Here's the after of what was developed. So it was a mixed-use development with commercial and residential all in one development and associated infrastructure to support that. So what happened here, and how could this regulation sort of help or address this? So the limits of disturbance is I sort of did an outline of what the limits of disturbance would be from the footprint of the buildings. And since these are large buildings, I showed these at 45 feet from the building. And this is the outline of what would be the limits of disturbance in this scenario. As you can see, it then does leave portions of this property to remain in its natural vegetative state, and it prevents this from being clear-cut arbitrarily as a result of the project. So this was 45 feet from the buildings and then 10 feet from certain parking up to the property line as a result. Now, what would happen with calculating for the number of tree replacement? So I did an analysis of how much existing forested area there was, overlaid that with what the area disturbances were, and then did a calculation on what the acreage would be that would determine the number of replacement trees required. So I did the calculation here. It ends up being 1.14 acres would be the measurement for what you need to replace. So that gives you a replacement requirement of 34 replacement trees. The parking lot trees, there's a requirement of 8 based on the number of spaces that we have. And then street trees along the frontage, there would be 9 required because of the 1 every 50 feet. Now these 17 trees can be also fulfilled by the replacement trees. So I did the greater of the replacement trees or the parking lot and street trees, and obviously 34 is greater. And then in this instance, the developer went above and beyond the 34 and did 50 trees on the site as a result. Now, what I did do is here's a calculation of if they clear cut the property entirely, so they got rid of all this vegetation for whatever reason. And so this really increases the number of trees that significantly, if you were to do that. You'd have to replace 3.5 acres, and that would come up with 107 trees that you would have to replace if that were the case. So this developer really did keep a tight footprint, as you can tell. But there are developers who will look at the entire property and want a clear slate when they start. So I think hopefully that gives you some perspective of the landscaping regulations. I'm going to stop sharing and ask, I guess, Peter and Marcy to chime in. All right. Go ahead, Marcy. Peter.
Yeah, I'm just trying to do my video.
Okay.
I really like the last example that you did, because I remember the presentation, and it was designed by a landscape architect first before the engineering. So you're really showing my cause with having landscape architects get involved earlier. So I appreciate that. But you had wanted me to step in and talk about the native trees, and we did while we were talking amongst ourselves. I was very concerned with being able to find natives in the nurseries, so that when you're specking native planting in a traditional specking plants in a traditional sense, you're finding the trees that you want. And in doing that research, I was reminded that many times a hybrid plant might be half native and half developed for some aspect of a native plant to bring up flowering or survivability in a, parking environment or what have you. And so that native group, we need to expand the definitions, but anything that like a hybrid planting, a native-var, cultivar, as long as there's an aspect of it that's native and as long as it's not invasive and it achieves the objective of continuing the tree canopy. And, we were trying to write language in that gave room for some freedom of the designer to be able to source materials and still comply with that regulation. So that's going to, I think, be something that we'll see how that works out over time. But that's what he was referring to about the different types of native plantings. But that was a big one. And I think, the example's a good one. We were very confused about parceling out the disturbance area and how that would actually function on different areas. And, I think this is a good example. It's, if you're going into a site that's completely treed, it's going to be completely untenable for a surveyor to go in and have to identify every, significantly sized tree to then figure out a replacement. So this, 30 per acre, and I think Mikkel, he was the one that explained it to me. If you take an acre of trees of a certain size, the canopy, if all the canopies are touching, you would get about 30 trees, and that's how that number was derived as a replacement value. So if the goal is to maintain a continuous cover of canopy and an acre of trees would create about 30 trees would create that cover, then that's how we sort of came up with that replacement. It's possible that you could have 50 smaller trees or 20 larger canopy trees. Every site's going to be a little different, and it's hard to try to write around that. But those are some of the two key things that stuck out in my work with the group, and I'll let Peter jump in. I know he had a lot of thoughts about the parking scenario.
Thanks, Marcy. This is Peter Henschel. Just a couple of points. I think we all, or at least Marcy and I, struggled at the beginning with the idea of switching the LOD into a limitation rather than just a definition of a project. And after a lot of discussion and review, I think the three of us came to feel that number one, it made a lot of sense. In addition to what Mikhail was saying about the limit lines limiting the clear cutting of the remaining portions of the site, it also, I think it significantly limits the amount of regrading. So somebody could not only come in and not clear cut, but they also could not come in and extensively regrade areas that were not required for the purposes of the project. And so the two of them combined, I think, were pretty critical elements of this. As far as just to clarify the number of trees per acre, the replacement trees per acre, that would be for a site if a developer were developing a site that had a treed area on it and did not want to inventory the trees to determine the number of significant trees, they could use that metric as an alternative to determine what they had to replace. But if conversely you had a site that didn't have a lot of area that was forested or didn't have a lot of significant trees on it, the numbers might be less if you actually inventoried the significant trees within the project area. We did have a lot of discussion about the parking, and I think we've come up with a good metric and a good description of what's required within the parking lots, both the requirements that there are end islands, landscaped end islands with canopy trees at the end of rows of parking, and in certain cases, alternatively, an island or row separation that would be landscaped between rows of parking. And I think those assure the fact that we would get, especially in the larger parking lots, enough internal canopy tree coverage to, limit the heat island effect, et cetera, within those areas. So those were some of the things that I was most concerned with when we embarked on this. But as I say, I think that the three of us spent a lot of time, both in meetings and independently, between meetings, working on this, and I think, from my point of view, very successfully came up with what I feel all of us are quite comfortable with as a good improvement over what the town has currently as a landscape reg, and going forward, what is forward looking for the community. So those are the two main points that I wanted to make about the what's entailed here. Thanks.
All right, Chuck, we hand it back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, McKeel, Marcy, and Peter. We really appreciate it. I know it's a lot of time, and drafting anything always takes a lot of time. And you could keep doing it. So we really appreciate it. Questions from commission members or other staff before we open up to the public?
Chuck, Fred Russo.
Hey, Fred.
This question is to Marcy. I'm going to be the first one to say that I don't know anything about landscaping, and I don't want to have a negative or a positive opinion until I ask Marcy, I think kind of two simple questions. One is, how do you feel that this is going to improve the regs from what we have already? What effect? And also, do you see any downside to it? I'm just thinking, if I was a developer and I came to the town and the regs are the way they're being proposed, would that create a flag to someone say, these are like way too strict for me? And I don't know the answer to those. I asked them legitimately for your opinion, because fortunately you're on the P&Z, you're a landscape architect, you're around builders, so you have a much better feel, I think, than probably any of us do. With those more realistic questions. I mean, we know what we have. I'm just going to assume, having been on the commission all these years, that landscaping has never become a major issue. Maybe it is, but at least I don't recall it being. And I guess I'm asking you, if you could give us your opinion in comparing the regs that exist today as to the ones that are being proposed, and can you see a negative effect or a negative side to it, so that if I were a developer and I came into town, would I say, listen, I don't want to count trees. I don't want to, and I'm sensitive to the fact that I don't want to see a full parking lot. It's crazy too. But where's that balance, or is there a balance? I don't know. Maybe you can enlighten me.
Sure. So, I mean, I hear it every day. I know sometimes that the developers don't get fairly represented because they're trying to get things approved all the time, and they don't want to be obstructionist to the commission and all that. And so, I do try to defend them, because my whole training has really been about a middle ground, and for 35 years, we'll just take parking as an example. I was raised to promote islands and tree canopy and heat cover. It's not a new concept. Our regs do address it. It's really, I think, where the improvement is putting the goals and objectives in the regs to say, look, we're doing this because we want to have a continuous canopy to promote, these things ecologically. The introduction of, and I pushed hard to not have so much intermittent islands as islands between bays, because you can get more trees when you have, a planted island between two bays as opposed to running through the parking lot. You would actually get more tree cover, and it makes it a little bit easy for snowplows to get through. And we talked about snowplow language and needing to see, having that identified. We talked about, controlling the heights in areas for protection of views across islands and things like that, and specifying small, medium, large trees and how they should go in for size. And a lot of that was to be clear and specific, and to not necessarily drive quantities, but to not have something that's inconsistent that says, all shrubs have to be planted with at 24 to 36 inches, and many times many shrubs might not even grow to 24 to 36 inches because you're looking to get a certain ground effect of cover. And, and so there was sort of that literal kind of discrepancy that we were correcting. But, the parking lot notion isn't a new thing. The native introduction is because, I've gone to the Yukon sites and I see them, and then I needed for my own edification to see where I could find them in the nurseries. And, they're not always as prevalent in the nurseries, and many times the true natives aren't, aren't, how do I say it? Aren't, bred for aesthetic purposes, but for ecological purposes, and both have their place. So, so we went back and forth of, how specific do you define that? And I had said publicly, maybe we promote more native to the perimery where we're abutting natural areas and allow more structure closer into buildings. But we kind of, you know, went with a higher percentage, but with the caveat that it would include a hybrid or a native or things like that, where you've got nurseries that are developing stock for marketable purposes, which is what developers want to see. A cleaner shrub that is a tighter habit that may have more profuse coloring or whatnot, but that are still have a native component and aren't going to ecologically deter the goal of the continuous cover with the flora and the fauna and all of that. But, and then we discuss language to, if you can't meet the 75%, explaining why and offering, a justification. And all of that's really to make the project site specific, and to not have, okay, well, these plants were used over here, so they must work over here. And that's not always the case. A designer is going to look at the orientation, the light, the water, and all of these kinds of things when they're placing the plants. And the earlier they can be in the project, they can also affect, the grading and the screening and the variety, which is equally as important to some of the native aspects of the cover. So we were trying to balance all of these different aspects of the design and, and to not, like, this gets back to the requiring surveys to specify every tree on a lot. That's really untenable from an affordability. So the 30 per acre and that method was a way to really give choice and to give some flexibility in how people approach the site. And when you look at a site like the one that McKeel presented, that was done by a landscape architect. You can see that the new buildings really parallel where the old buildings were, that they protected, that tree cover that was there as much as they could with balancing out the density that they proposed. And it turned out to be a really good project. And when you add in the trees that went back into the parking lot, it was easy to accomplish what that replacement number is. So hopefully there's not a huge net impact on the developer as far as having to provide that much more, landscape cover. Hopefully a good developer is going to want to put that anyway. But, we see these projects that are not as big as that one and sometimes smaller, and the regs really have to run across all these different ranges of projects, which can be quite challenging to review, and so, that's really, I mean, I don't know if I'm answering your question, Fred, but, we did the best we could to sort of find the middle ground for every goal, which is not always an easy thing, and not everybody's going to be 100% happy, but,
Marcia, one other question that came to my mind, and then I'll turn it over to whoever wants to ask a question. When you and Peter went through this process of reviewing and coming up with these new proposed regulations, did you look at any other towns, at least coastline towns, that, I don't know, maybe they've upgraded theirs, so we say, hey, theirs are pretty good, they work, or maybe theirs are obsolete. I'm just curious, what basis did you guys use to develop this new set of regulations? Were they just look at ours and try to make them better based on what we kind of know happens on a normal basis in our own P&Z, or did you go out beyond our borders and say, hey, what is North Branford doing? What's Guilford doing? Whatever town, Madison, Clinton? I'm just curious if that was a part of the process.
Well, my focus was on really determining how long it takes a tree to grow and differences in variety and sort of, fixing my, updating my biology around that and finding like nurseries that provide, like the American Beauties line is a native line of plants that's provided by Pride's Corner up in Lebanon and out in Cromwell. to sort of look at availability. So that was more my focus. I believe McKeel, jump in. You were looking at some of the
Yeah.
town coverages and things.
I did, and I know we looked at some other towns, especially for the parking lot.
Yeah, this is Peter. We did look at especially, at least I looked at Windsor, which I've been familiar with in some of my architectural work. But I think, Fred, to answer your question, in general, we did not go and extensively survey what other towns had been doing in terms of their landscape regs, because Marcy, from her point of view as a landscape architect and the experience with many towns, already, in a sense, already brought that to the table. And I, conversely, with my experience as an architect with a firm that has done a lot of quite large architectural development projects, have looked at many other towns and their requirements for site development. So I think that past experience on both of our parts, and then of course McHale's experience, all basically answered your question about whether we were looking at or understanding what other towns may have done in the past. But again, I always refer to, in the parking especially, to what the town of Windsor has done, which is, in my mind, been quite good in terms of regulation.
The only thing I would add is,
go ahead.
I benefited from 2 years of work that people had done prior. I was able to go through those notes and documents and drafts, and I think with fresh eyes that I brought to it was trying to pull out the themes that they were trying to get at. What were the values we wanted to reflect?
And one thing in addition that I think a general concept that we had, Fred, relative to being too restrictive, or whether that would put a damper on people that were considering Branford for development, was basically the concept that most good developers and large developers want to come to a town that has, relatively high standards for the town and for all the other projects that are in the town. And it's better to have a strong set of standards and a strong response on the part of the town than to come to a town that doesn't have any significant standards and therefore very little control over how the town has been developed. So I think it's a balance, obviously.
I agree with that.
And to just repeat myself, I have to say, like, the landscape regs as they relate to parking lots, was nothing about them was surprising to me with what we were proposing, or I had seen more with the intermittent islands and was trying to weigh the language to continuous islands between bays. But in terms of, like, I was looking at it from, if the goal is to get continuous canopy coverage, how does that fit? And yeah, every 15 spaces, if you don't have a dividing island between the longitudinal way, yeah, that's what you need to do to start to protect that. If you have the other island and you say you have a walk coming between, they're written in a way to give the designer, and I can't even tell you how many parking lots I've designed, and the goals of, like, tenant, big tenant users and aligning parking. There's a lot that goes into it that we don't always see. And yeah, they want to see the trees on the end islands, and they want to have visibility across, for protection for pedestrians, so the pedestrians are seen. So you don't want high 12-foot shrubs. So there's attention we were paying to that was just based on experience and really not being afraid to double check ourselves that we're following the right intent and following what our guidelines are for good practice. From like being overly restrictive or underly restrictive, and that's where I think there was some referral. But the newest thing for me, quite honestly, is the limits of disturbance, and I think Peter and I both had to get our arms around it. And I think McHale, that's something that he understood and had worked with and had worked frequently. When we got into conversations about screenage and varieties and all of that, there was language that was introduced from that to just not be a continuous row of arborvitaes. Those are the things that have gotten to be quick, easy solutions that maybe aren't the best solutions, and there's other ways to approach it. And we wanted to write the regs in a way that could encourage other types of creative solutions.
Yeah,
So,
one last comment about the limited disturbance in the area beyond it, which I think we did make some tweaks to that language, which would in fact allow a developer to do some work within that beyond the boundary of the limit if it was for the purpose of, for instance, removing invasive species or replacing some significant trees that might be in poor condition, or in fact just improving the character, the environmental and biomass character of that area. So we did, I think, add enough flexibility so that if good things were to be done with that area that was beyond that boundary line, it wouldn't prescriptively limit a developer from doing it. It's just the negative, the clear cutting, the extensive regrading where it wasn't necessary, that puts a nice limit on.
Thank you both.
Well, and just like if you're going to talk about grading, if we have a regulation, I'm not sure we're changing it under this, but I'm just going to explain it from an engineering perspective. If you're regrading a site and you're required to, do it at a 3-to-1 slope and have wall heights of a certain height, that increases disturbance in some cases. Sometimes it's easier just put up a nice 2-foot wall, or or it might be warranted because of the rock or whatever to have a higher wall. And I think the regs need to have that kind of flexibility and balance to it. And I think I don't know if we fully addressed some of that from that perspective, but that's where I think I was really trying to represent some of the developer perspective in the meetings, to loosen up things with that, because, I've seen where having a 3-to-1 slope has actually increased, disturbance near wetlands, when if they were allowed to put a low wall or go at a slightly steeper grade and plant the slope more intensely, would protect the wetlands. So, I think there's still things that we need to look at, but this was a really good, strong first pass.
Well, thank you, Marcy, Fred, McKeel, Peter. Other questions from commission members before we open it up to the public?
Yeah, one last comment, Joe Chadwick speaking. On the limit of disturbance, I would propose that the dimensional offset is really a suggestion to develop an area of disturbance, and that the actual limits of disturbance should be based on a real logistics plan of the site. In Branford, we typically have two kinds of soil: sandy soil, which you have just an incredible angle of repose in order to get down deep enough in the foundation or do any work on, or rock, which you have to blast, which has an entirely separate logistical menu of tasks. And then if you're working anywhere near a significant tree, you've got to have a fairly generous freeboard. A 50-foot tree is going to probably give you about 30 feet to stay away from it. So it's difficult to practically build something. In the example building, I think they probably set all the pieces with the wall. On another project, you might have to have a crane. There is a lot of activity that goes on the site, and you may only need a few feet on one side of a building, but you may need more space on another. You may be able to stage everything from the parking lot. Depends upon the configuration of the site. So the idea of just simply having a building perimeter and an offset that establishes limited disturbance seems a little limiting, and it's just sort of like asking for further interpretation later down the road. So if the net area of the limit of disturbance equals the building plus some offset, that's the area you're allowed to disturb. Okay, come in with the logistics plan, show us how you're going to actually build this, where the cuts are going to be, where the equipment's going to be staged, where the spoils piles are, how they're going to be protected, and that establishes the limit of disturbance. If you end up with several specimen trees that need a huge amount of protection that may otherwise encroach upon that perimeter, you get a bonus and get to do the disturbance someplace else. But in terms of practical building, the limits of disturbance as they're presently stated are kind of schematic.
Thanks, Joe. So, okay, so that's something to consider. Are there other? Well, I just want to hear other comments here. Sharon.
Thank you. Sharon Hutner here. First of all, I would also like to thank everybody who worked on this for the many years that this has been being discussed. And I would like to add another name, Shirley McCarthy, who has made an enormous contribution in developing this document to where it has come to today. I also would like to say that I'm very much in favor of this, these regulations. And just another kind of comment about why all of a sudden landscaping is so important is, I think, unfortunately, we are now living in an era of climate change, and I don't think that we appreciated our trees as much as we do now, because I don't know if you can remember the drought last summer, the heat and the lack of water. And I don't know about anybody else, but every time I pulled into a parking lot, I made sure that I could find a tree to park under so that I could have some relief from the heat. And it's been shown that trees can decrease the heat effect from 4 degrees to 14 degrees. So we really need trees to help with that. And I think also it reduces the amount of, it's been shown that it saves money in reducing the amount of air conditioning that is needed, and it increases more trees, increase property values, and has increased health of individuals who live near trees, and of course our wildlife. I mean, we have just lost billions of birds in the last few years, and so trees are definitely helping maintain our wildlife for what we have right now. So that's why I really feel like these regulations are really important. But I do have one question. In the applicability section, it says that this section shall not apply to permits involving single-family dwellings on individual lots. Now, I can remember a while back, we had an application that was on Totoket Road where the owner wanted to build houses for family members. And that lot was clear cut. And I heard many negative and upsetting comments from residents in Branford about how the commission could let that happen. And so I'm wondering if these new regulations would have prevented that.
So I would hope so. And I think it helps to define where the limits of disturbance should go. The interesting thing with that proposal is that they did have a limits of disturbance shown on the map, but they clear cut the property anyways. And we don't have any recourse for that. But in this, we do have a recourse in that we can say, okay, you cut down an extra acre of land, you need to provide this.
Okay.
So yeah, I think at least it gives us a remedy that's clearly articulated.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other comments from commission members?
Yeah, Joe, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm trying to get, you're saying about tree replacement and covering about 30 trees per acre, but if you have, I'm just a question, I'm just trying to give you an example. If you were to have a 2-acre site and you're putting up a commercial building with some parking and whatever, and you're disturbing, or you need in the neighborhood of 1.25 acres, 1.5 acres, and in that, and this is wooded property or property with some significant trees, and so now you're taking account of trees that you got to take down because this is where the building is going or the parking lot or whatever. But so what I'm trying to get at is if there was 20 trees that we were taking down, but you don't have room for 20 more trees because there's only a 1/2 acre or 3/4 acre left, and some of that land is not being disturbed. So how do you come to an agreement of what you can or can't do? Or am I missing something? I'm trying to figure out when somebody has some property, what are the regulations for replacing trees if there's no place to replace them?
Right. So we do have a modification section, and there's really 2 recourses. One is if you have land that's still in its natural habitat, you could sort of offer that up as a conservation area and protect that land. The other is that we can do a fee in lieu of, where you essentially provide compensation for what you can't accomplish. So, no, both of those are articulated in other ways in our regulations for other purposes. So, affordable housing, we do fee in lieu of. We have conservation easements that are allowed for other special exception or subdivision requirements. So these are other tools that we can come into bear, and that we articulate that as alternatives.
This is Peter speaking. I think in general, though, when we were looking at the normal metrics of applying this to typical sites and the amount of land that would be disturbed and the amount that would be hard covered by a building and what would be left over, the numbers in most cases seem to work quite nicely for the ability to satisfy these requirements without having to have any special exceptions provided. These numbers are not so high that in a normal type of site development, parking lot development, et cetera, you would not be able to comply. So I think it would be a sort of strange exceptional project that would force you into that alternative solution.
Well, my feeling is, I think, and I'm only thinking out loud here, is why do you have to replace 1 for 1 or something like that if you're building your building, you're putting in your parking areas, you're doing your landscaping, you're putting in your trees in some nice places and whatever, and yet you're under the obligation, so to speak, if you go 1 for 1, to put in 20 trees, but yet you can prove or show that if we put a tree here, a tree there, we do it, and here, there, and everywhere, and it only, plus counting the non-disturbance area, maybe it takes 10 more trees to completely cover the whole site with, the 10 trees is going to cover the 10 trees, but not 20. Why can't we just let that be okay? In other words, the canopy of what's left on the property to develop, that's being left behind, is being fulfilled. So why do you have to have an obligation to look for 10 more trees or have this applicant have some kind of fee that he has to pay because of that? I think it's if you comply with covering all the square footage that's left, I think that you met your obligation. That's my opinion, I think, on the example I gave. I'm sure there's some other areas that may not apply, but I'm just saying, using that example right now.
I mean, the trees that you would put in are required to be put in, for instance, for parking areas and as part of the landscape in front of the building, et cetera. Remember that those trees can be used as a count of the replacement also. It's not the replacement trees aren't in addition to everything that's required is landscaping. What you've already done is your landscape requirements are part of the count, and typically that might be enough.
Well, I'm saying if it's not enough, let's say you're doing everything you possibly can, possibly could, to cover all the square footage that's disturbed and whatever, and you met you're covered. You covered all the property, and yet you still got 5 more trees you got to place someplace to try to come up with the number that you disturbed or that you destroyed in order to to build the building, parking lot, etc. So why should you be obligated to fulfill that as long as you did maximum coverage on the existing property for the landscaping? I mean, there should be some flexibility there instead of using a number, using coverage maybe as well as a number for when you're doing the landscaping. I'm thinking. I'm not. I could be totally wrong on this, but right now that's the way I'm thinking. What I'm hearing. I just have an opinion on that. That's all right now.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. This is good input. But let's, speaking of input, let's get some public input. So let's open up for public comment. Does any member of the public wish to comment? Mikhail, Dan, who do you see?
I'm looking for hands. I don't see any.
Yep, I don't see any hands raised.
Oh, there's a hand.
Oh, there we go. Joseph Mizraji. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to commend the commissioners on tackling this issue. I do think that some of the concerns that, if you just get coverage, is that sufficient? I would just simply note that Branford has lost about 40% of its tree cover and over the years. And so I think the present model isn't working if we're trying to preserve trees. Clearly, this idea that you can plant a few trees to compensate for what you've taken down, people are more than willing to underperform in that category. So I do think the commission is doing a great thing to move forward in this area and at least creating some structure to this. I kind of wanted to second Sharon's point. I brought this up last time we talked about this. I don't really want to hold up this this idea for a single point. I think it's important to see how it goes moving forward. But I think carving out an exception for single-family homes, I think is unfortunate. I think that, like you mentioned, there are situations where people will clear-cut properties, and I think it would be, something to keep looking forward to in the future to not carve out that exception and see how things go. But I wouldn't want to hold up what I think is a valuable process for that sticking point. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like Perry Maresca has a hand risen.
Yes, thank you. So Perry Maresca, Branford Economic and Business Development. I was involved in this when it was up a few years back, and voiced a lot of the concerns, and I do have to commend both Peter and Marcy, as well as McKeel, for working on trying to find a solution that would not have developers running away in droves. Right now, they're probably only running away a couple at a time as opposed to droves. But Commissioner Fred had mentioned about developers not crazy about more. I just want to say developers are not crazy about more regulations. But this itself can work best if a landscape architect submits designs for approval, similar to what is currently required for lighting plans when a development is up to the planning and zoning for approval. Most important, though, I think what has to be recognized in this is that every property is unique. We've got some pieces of property there that are currently very flat with no trees, and we've got others that are rocky, hilly, tons of trees. So we have to make sure that there's some acceptance, some way to make some exceptions based on the location, the topography, terrain, the needs and the uses of the property. So there definitely has to be some flexibility in an effort to not prohibit a promising development from fruition here in town. Most of the projects that I have recently been privy to that have not yet come before the planning and zoning have taken impressive steps toward beautification of property with open space for their employees and visitors to appreciate, as well as people driving by or seeing. And I think to the point of, I think some of the commissioners had said earlier about appreciating the property, and it does add, and I think Peter Henschel had mentioned that, you know, it adds to the profitability of the beauty of it. One of the things that did keep coming back, is one thing that I had talked about before and kept coming back to me, is that the 12 inches just seems like it's awfully small, but you know, I do know based on some of the conversations was it takes a while to get to there, but somewhere closer to like a 15-inch would have been a little bit easier. There again, I guess it depends maybe on the tree type, how quick it comes to getting to 12 inches versus 15 inches. And again, we're talking now native species. This is also something else that was discussed before. A few years ago, it was just trees in general. Then as discussions ensued, it became, no, we're really more concerned about the native species. So that's good. And then the only question I would have is possibly if Joe Bayusa would have an idea based on what he does, how available are native species for, say, ground cover and other uses for landscaping, and what are their normal chances of survival versus what's out there today?
Thank you, Mr. Maresca. And perhaps Joe Bayusa can jump in. I don't know if you want to do it now or later, Joe, or so. But what do we? Yeah,
Joe Bayusa, there's plenty of ground cover out there that's considered native, and it's very, very hardy. So there would be no problem in ground cover if that's what you're talking about, like Pachysandra and different kinds of vines.
Okay, good. Thank you.
If I could jump in, Joe, we actually kind of expanded the ground cover to include really many plants like grasses and things that stayed under 12 to 18 inches in height. So even some small shrubs and things like that, because of the size specification of where we were starting. So we expanded the section on the ground covers of what else that would include. But you know, that lends itself not just to encouraging canopy connection, but also connection of a variety of native species on the ground level. And you know, that doesn't always have to be, you know, shrubs that are 15. Like, that's a pet peeve of mine, that, you know, you work on a site plan that's 100 scale for a big project, and you know, you only planted you put in all 15-foot or plus, you know, huge shrubs that overgrow the spaces instead of designing for it to grow in correctly, which would involve more plants, but maybe many smaller plants. So, and you know, that's a case where we would want to see more detail in the planting plan and give more flexibility for introducing smaller plant sizes so they can get more plants planted for saving cost. And we also encourage, I don't think this came up, but like we saw tonight, you know, water quality basins. You know, we'd really like to see water quality basins where those are opportunities if they're placed in the right place, because they don't tend to get maintained, but to really add, you know, lots of native types of species, coneflowers and things like that, which can, you know, really expand some of the insect populations and things like that, and help with groundwater control than just digging a straight detention basin and lining it with stone. So.
Thanks, Marcy. So let's continue with public input if we can. Who's next? Mikhail, is it?
Heather, did you raise your hand?
Hi, Heather Gwinnell, Zoning and Wetlands Enforcement. Comments. First is it's much easier to both approve and enforce guidelines that are clear, that exist, and that everybody knows what they are expected to do. And then they good developers, generally speaking, will be drawn to places with clear guidelines, and good developers don't always want to cut every corner. And third is that getting permission to do something different is maybe shouldn't always be encouraged. We should try and set the guidelines out in such a way as that we don't have to expect developers to always be trying to, well, I'll do this, except this is harder. That's, with clear guidelines going into it, we can avoid some of the problems that come afterwards. And obviously from the enforcement perspective, I like the regulations to actually state what's there and not be like, well, we kind of feel like it would be better to have more trees. Like that doesn't help. That's all.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate it. And next hand raised, I see our former town planner, Harry Smith. Harry, I know you submitted some written comments. So you gonna summarize those for us or give us some comments?
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see everybody again. I'm really speaking more as a town resident, though, it's impossible to put aside my hat as a former town planner. I don't really want to go through all those in detail. I don't want to extend the discussion. First of all, I do want to say I'm very supportive of, in general, the current draft and the work that's been done, particularly by McKeel, in pulling everything together that started in the last year of my time with the town. We had a lot of interesting discussions at this landscaping committee. Even before that, in pulling together an initial draft that Shirley and Peter was involved in with myself. So this has been a long, long road, as was mentioned. There are a couple of things that I just wanted to highlight quickly. In terms of the focus on the view from the public right-of-ways, I think, in my experience with the town and also my previous employment over almost 40 years, landscaping has also been very instrumental in mitigating visual impacts and different site development features, things that are sometimes back of house, like dumpster locations, loading areas, and so forth, from abutting properties. Particularly with respect to Branford, which has a lot of its commercial development spread out along commercial districts along Route 1, from basically one end of the town to the other. This is really important where it abuts a lot of existing development, a lot of smaller lots, where houses, particularly along West Main Street, crowded up to the commercially zoned areas in a lot of locations. And sometimes these are not always in locations where the residences are neatly in a residential district, and the commercial is, sometimes they're intermingled. The commercial district extends a little bit into the residential area. So I was happy to see the return of the residential district greenbelt buffer, which I think has been an important tool. Particularly an example of that is the Summit Place development when that came in. There was a lot of comment, I think, from the residences abutted that commercial area. And again, it wasn't being buffered necessarily from commercial use, but it was a commercial zone, a use that was allowed in that zone with the zone change, if you will, the incentive housing zone. And that was part of the package of tailoring that development, if you will, into that area. So I think there was a provision that was proposed, which was basically a screening requirement. Let's see if I've got the number right. Which I think is landscape screening requirements in 63H. And that is noted as being something that may be required. along a number of specific features like property boundaries, parking areas, surface yards, know the locations. I love the wording in there. I think it covers almost everything I could think of. And it's not necessarily between developed and natural areas. The environmental, well, I take that back. It really, I think it's not really stated here, but I would hope that is intended to augment that the function of the residential district greenbelt buffer in those locations where maybe it's not abutting a residential district boundary. So I really think you ought to consider making that mandatory. And if you feel there's a need to provide yourself an out so that for in certain circumstances where that may not be appropriate, you can back off of that. I think you could list those requirements very specifically and do that. That's maybe something you ought to consider doing because I really sensitive to the point McKeel made earlier in the presentation that you want to have regulations that are clear, easily enforceable, and where people know what they need to do, and residents also know what people are going to have to do to address their concerns. So I think rather than having it as a may be required type of deal, when you don't have necessarily some clear circumstances under which it may be required, kind of leaves it open to a lot of interpretation that may not be ideal. I also make a pitch for, and I just ask a question maybe, what is meant by landscape professionals? I mean, there are people like master gardeners with different credentials, but I think following up some of the comments Marcy made, I think it's important, it's in the regulations currently, that a landscape architect prepare the landscape plan, particularly if you're talking about making it more flexible and sort of dependent on appropriate design. And a lot of thinking really needs, I think, to go into developing a plan that complies with these new regulations. I think that's great. But I think having a default definite requirement for landscape architect, again, with a provision to back out where it's appropriate, might make, facilitate making these new regulations successful as they're sort of rolled out into development review practice. Again, I think I noted in the fall, the creation of the LOD doesn't, unless there is a conservation restriction associated with it, create by default foolproof protection. And certainly not intended to, but I think, there are circumstances where property owners end up going into areas and needing to do things or wanting to do things, and to add a clear requirement that in order to make any change to an LOD that's approved after the regulations are adopted, that you absolutely need to come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission, the commission itself, for a site plan or a special permit modification, if that's the process, would be another tool you could have in place to kind of ensure that what is being anticipated as the result of the regulations is what actually happens. Just as a minor item, I think there is an exception right now for the center business district from landscape regulations, and that is brought back in here in this new draft. But a few years ago, the commission adopted a Main Streets Overlay District, which really created some specific standards for the areas along Main Street and Montaouise where the if you will, on-street downtown kind of development that is present in Branford is provided for. So it's, and that we reduced the density, the commission reduced the density in the rest of the BC district. So I think the proper exclusion is probably more of the Main Streets Overlay District, but you can think about that and decide what you want to do. Also, maybe a little more specificity on Section 6.3E with respect to some requirements for front yard landscaping. Right now, the only thing really there is a hard and fast requirements are canopy street trees. The commission's, there's not a lot of clear language right now, but has been often, and I've certainly suggested in the past, providing shrub lines and different elements of landscaping to help screen headlight glare from public rights of way I think that's a concern. So that maybe noting that as something to be addressed and leaving how it is addressed as a flexible design element might be an approach you could take. Again, there's more comments in the writing. I don't want to prolong this, so I'll just stop there. But it's nice to talk to you all again. I hope you consider some of these changes, and I'm just trying to be helpful based on my experience. I will note that there was a comment brought up about the Totucket Road development. I just want to note that that was not in the zoning, the area covered by the town of Branford zoning regulations. That was in Pine Orchard zoning regulations, so section 6.8 did not apply. So that was part of the problem there, was that it was just reviewed as a subdivision. And we could not, as far as we understood with, I think, input from the town attorney, apply section 6.8 to that development. So that was part of the issue there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there other members of the public who wish to comment? You see anyone, McKeel or Dan?
Don't see any hands, but.
Okay. Okay, then what I think we should do, we can either close the hearing or continue the hearing. We're not going to vote on this tonight. My sense is, I thought there were some substantive comments that are worth that you may want to revise the draft. You can still do that after the close of the public hearing. If you wanted to. That said, there's no limit on the time frame here. It's a commission sponsored, so we don't have any deadlines in which we could do it. So my suggestion would be that the committee, the three of you guys, meet again sometime in the next month, and we pick this up, maybe not at the next meeting, but the following meeting. The comments that I heard, Joe Chadwick raised an interesting question about limits of disturbance, although I didn't quite get the feel on what the text change you would suggest on that was, Joe. So maybe you can talk on that. Joe Viuzzo raised the question about the one-for-one exchange, and if there's some flexibility with that. Harry Smith raised a number of concerns, I think, and they were in writing, so that's helpful. That may suggest some tweaks. Those were the mains. I know Perry raised a couple things. Maybe the size should be 12 versus 15 or whatever inches. But those were sort of there weren't super things, but there were some things that maybe, that's my takeaway. You may want to tweak something, and you may want to have the three of you guys look at those things and come back with some suggestions. And whether we keep we can do that as a public hearing open. That maybe, if you do something radical, or if you think this is more in a minor nature, we can close the public hearing and approve something that's modified. What do you think?
From staff, we're okay with closing the public hearing.
Okay. Is commission good with that? I mean, you could still meet, I don't know. Does that mean that Peter can't talk, close after the close of the public hearing, issue? That's, that's the only,
I think the three should meet, and if they have something to tweak and something, then, and I think the hearing should be left open just in case we need some other comments from other people. I think give more flexibility if the hearing was stayed open, based on, because we don't know what the tweaking is going to look like.
Okay. Let's keep it open. That's fine. But when do you want to keep it open to? When can you guys meet? That's the issue. I mean, that's a safer way legally too, because then we don't pay. We can't hear from Peter as not a member of the commission.
I think if we don't take it up at the next meeting, but do it a month from now, that's fine.
Okay. So let's then continue this meeting, this public hearing to our. Do we know when the date is? When's our March meeting?
It's March 5th. It's the same numbered dates as this month.
Okay. So we'll continue this item number 4, public hearing on the landscape regulations, to our March 5th meeting. Okay. So, and that will be our March 5th meeting remotely starting at 7 p.m. We have 2 more items, public hearings, and we also have items to discuss that are on the agenda. And I have 9:05. Do you want to take a 5-minute break? because we're going to be out for another hour, I think, at least. Why don't we do that? Just, is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, let's do it.
I support that.
Okay, 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 9:10. Take a recess. Okay, McKeel, our commission members back. I think you're muted, McKeel.
Fred, you there?
Yeah.
And Marcy, I still see them muted.
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Joe?
Joe Vayuso here.
Joe
Okay.
Vayuso, okay.
Joe Chadwick? All right. There's Fred.
Okay.
Sharon?
Yep, I'm back.
Okay.
So just Joe Chadwick?
Correct. All right, there's Joe.
Okay. Okay, we'll call this meeting back to order. And we're now on public hearing number 5, which is John Wolfenden, applicant and owner for 10 Montgomery Parkway. And that's a special exception coastal site plan for a new single-family home and accessory apartment. Is the applicant ready to proceed with that one?
Yes, good evening, Jim Preddy again, Criscolo Engineering. I'm representing Michelle Soler-Nose, who's actually the buyer. Jack Wolfenden currently owns the lot. I am the property next door. I'll share the screen. So what they'd like to do is take the house down and build it mostly in the same footprint, with some expansion to the rear, and which is basically in a conforming area. But taking it down and putting it back up and some slight adjustments did require some variances, which we did receive approval from, and CAM approval as well. The only reason we're here, and I'll show you, this is what the house will look like. It's about 5 feet taller than the old house, but it's still well within the regulations. The reason we're here is that on the second floor over the garage, there's this bonus room that Michelle's trying to fit out for her daughter that's going to be going to college. And this little kitchenette here suddenly makes it an ADU, or makes it look like an ADU. So we're here for the special exception for that, which triggers also another camera view, because all the ADUs now require camera views. So that's why we're here.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Preddy. Dan, I think you did this one.
That's right. I could share my screen. Let's see here. Okay. Let me zoom in a little closer. All right, we're at 10 Montgomery Parkway. It's the R3 zoning district. It's a demolition of the old building that was built in 1947. They received, actually this is an image of the survey. This orange area is where that ADU is going to be, with that exterior staircase as a separate point of ingress and egress. As Jim mentioned, they did receive variances in December for a front setback of 24.5 feet where 30 is required, and a side yard setback of 14 feet where 15 was required. So the variances to necessitate just the dimensional aspects of this project have already been secured. It's the existence of that unit that has its own bathroom facilities and kitchen facilities that triggers this need for a special exception for an accessory apartment. This is an aerial image of the existing house to be demolished. In terms of the coastal criteria, the coastal resources nearby will be preserved through the limited shoreward expansion. They're not getting any closer to the sound there, and the resources would be protected through the proposed soil and erosion controls. Moving on down towards the the departmental comments. We received, as part of the coastal site plan requirements, we send it to DEEP. That 35-day window elapsed. They did not provide any comments. Therefore, we can treat that as an approval from DEEP. They did not raise any issues within that 35-day window that they have. Building official in the wetlands and town engineer did not raise any issues in terms of the special exception requirements. Accessory apartments are permitted in the R3 zone if they receive the special exception. The parcel is over 1/4 acre. It is undersized for the R3 zoning district, but the siting of the accessory apartment over the garage makes for an efficient use of the space. And there are multiple homes on Montgomery Parkway that have attached garages with second floor livable space. So just from the outside, this design would not be out of place with the neighborhood. In terms of our findings and conditions, I would recommend that the commission approves it. There's sufficient parking on the site. You need 3 spaces. They have that with the coastal site plan / special exception findings that the commission finds it's consistent with the Connecticut Coastal Management Act, and the proposed use of an accessory apartment is consistent with our regulations, with the conditions of the standard conditions of erosion and control measures to be installed, and that the effective date would be February 16th.
Check in, Chair. Thanks, Dan. Dan, for accessory apartments, we have restriction.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Chuck.
I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's an affordability restriction that I think we need to add as a condition.
Yes, we can certainly add that.
Yeah, you can just throw that in.
I don't have the boilerplate language, but
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Okay. Questions, comments from commission members? Let's open it up to the public. Any member of the public wish to comment? Do you anyone see anyone? Doesn't look like it, right?
No hands raised.
Okay. Okay. Any further comments from staff or commission members? Hearing none, then we can close this matter as a public hearing. Dan and Mr. Preddy, you're fine with the affordability restriction, correct?
Absolutely, it's standard for all of these.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So we can, before we vote on that, you can throw
That's
that
right.
in.
I'll add it onto the conditions.
All right. It's in your email.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, so we'll close item number 5 as a public hearing, and let's open up number 6, which is Mark J. Farfard, applicant and owner, 55 Harding Avenue, a special exception coastal site plan, another demolition of existing home and construction of a new single-family home. Is applicant ready to proceed on that one?
Yes, me again. Jim Preddy,
Okay.
Control Engineering. Also, architect Philippe Campus is with us. He designed the new structure. I will share my screen. So this is the survey. 55 Harding is the existing house. As you can kind of see by the contours, this slopes from the road down toward the Branford River, and that will be significant in a moment when I show we get there. So this is the new house. It's kind of oriented front to back a little more. It's a little less wide along the street, a few feet shorter here, a few feet shorter here, but in this roughly in the same location as the house. Does extend back some, but you'll see when I get there that the front of the house will only look like it's one story because we're playing into the grade here. Typical erosion controls and that sort of thing. You know, we have the coastal resources on here. We are providing some stormwater storage for the roof drains, and I will show you. And I'll let, if you have any questions about the architecture, I'll let Philippe answer those. But just to give you, so this is what the front of the house will look like, but when you go to the rear, you'll see a little more because it's a walkout. And again, here's from the sides. See the sloping down. So they're really kind of building it into the grade that's there. The reason for the special exception is that this area here on the main level, which I'll call the street level, has an accessory apartment right here that does have access to the house and the garage, and has a little deck out on the back. At the just for reference, I mean, the house is about 2,700 square feet, and the ADU is only 700. So I think we meet the criteria for that as well. And I don't know if Philippe, there's anything you wanted to add, or wait and see if there's any questions. But that's it. I think otherwise we meet all the other bulk standards.
Okay, to Chair. Thank you, Mr. Preddy. And Dan, I think you did this one as well.
That's right.
You want to run through it with us?
Absolutely. Let's see. Okay. This application is similar to the last one in terms of they're asking for a special exception for an accessory apartment. I'll zoom in a little closer on the site map here. The yellow is the outline of the parcel. The blue is where the Branford River starts. There's actually a parcel in between this parcel and the Branford River. That purple line right there, that's the flood zone. So all the work is upland of that flood zone barrier, or of that flood zone delineation, sorry. And that orange square right there is where that ADU would be on the second floor, in relation to the red, which is the rest of the proposed single family building. Let me zoom out a little bit here. All the work is behind the setbacks. The existing building is, and all the future work would be behind the R3 applicable setbacks. In terms of, oh, here we go. We got an aerial view of the current building there. We have the garage and the single family. In the new design, I believe the garage is going to be on the other side. In terms of the coastal criteria, because this is a coastal site plan, the coastal resources would be preserved because all the work is behind, is upland of the floodplain, and through the proposed soil and erosion controls, any site work being done would not have any adverse impacts to the nearby Branford River. It's actually beyond that 100-foot buffer. In terms of the coastal criteria and sending it to DEEP, we did send it to them. We had an inquiry from them on a drainage report and additional info about the underground stormwater storage galleries. That information was included in the original application. I made that available to DEEP. I just pointed out to them where those calculations were on the materials. And they did not have any further correspondence after that. The 35-day period elapsed, so we could take that as no issues were raised from DEEP. They asked for more information, and that information was supplied. In terms of the special exception criteria, R3 is one of the districts where you can achieve an accessory apartment due to their larger minimum lot sizes. This parcel is over half of an acre. The siting of the accessory apartment within the principal structure, like 10 Montgomery, is an efficient use of the space, and there are other homes on Harding Avenue that host 2 or more dwelling units, so the density is not out of the norm for this street, let alone the neighborhood. And the proposed accessory apartment will be within that envelope with the single family, so it wouldn't be a site concern. And in terms of our findings and conditions, before we get to that, the required reviews, we did have one comment from the town engineer that only one roof leader pipe shown leading to the infiltration system. Likely roof leader piping should be shown with adequate capacity pipe size for the area of the roof. The building official just noted that a 4-foot high approved barrier will be required for the in-ground pool associated with this application, but that would be part of the building permit. No comments from inland wetlands because there are no inland wetlands nearby. And we already mentioned the deep comments. In terms of our recommendation, recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission approves it with the following findings: that the proposed coastal site plan is consistent with the Connecticut Coastal Area Management Act, and the proposed use and accessory apartment on the property is consistent with the special exception requirements, with the following conditions. One, our affordable requirement for the accessory apartments, which I just pasted in the meantime between the last one. And that the prior to start of construction, erosion control measures shall be installed, and that the applicant must install roof leaders to the satisfaction of the town engineer's comments, and then just that effective date.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Questions, comments from commission members? If not, let's open up to the public. I see we got a note in the chat that someone tried to speak at the last public hearing and we missed them. So maybe what we'll do after let's complete this one, and then maybe if that person's still around, if they have comments, they can we'll reopen that so they can make the comments. So in any event, is there anyone, again, we're on 55 Hardin Avenue. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this one? Does anyone see anyone?
I don't see any hands raised for this application.
Okay. Okay. Any further comments from Mr. Preddy? Any comments?
No, I think this is pretty straightforward.
Right. Any comments from commission members and staff? Hearing none, then okay. Then we'll close item number 6 as a public hearing, again, the 55 Harding Avenue. And with that, I'm wondering, is Sandy Kraus still available? She's still listening?
I don't believe so.
Okay. I think she had Mr. Preddy, as I know you're still here for the applicant. I see I'll read it for the record that it says, she said, I had my hand raised for 10 Montgomery. My concern is with the amount of impervious surface in the runoff to Long Island Sound. Apartments increase the need for parking. We all get water in our basements and are concerned that the variance was granted as a house that was going to be retrofitted and not torn down. Once the daughter leaves, this can be rented, a rented apartment, and the kitchen can be enlarged. To correct the record, there are no other apartments on Montgomery Parkway that are rented. This property was reduced in size after the owner inherited it, as he added extra land to his property. By Sandy Kraus. Thank you for considering my comments. So, Mr. Preddy, do you have any objection to reopening the record to considering this? And if we consider this, we'd certainly like to have you address it.
I guess we can open it back up for this. Just a couple of things. I mean, Michelle has no intention of renting this out, but because it could be an apartment for somebody in the future if they bought the house, that's why we came before you to include this. The driveway is not getting any bigger, so that we're not increasing any of the impervious surface that way. And the application at ZBA was always to tear it down and rebuild it, so I'm not really sure what that comment was about.
Okay, so and are you making the current drainage situation any worse?
No.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Preddy. We'll reclose that matter as a public hearing. It looks like somebody, I did see a hand raised after we had closed the public hearing, so maybe we missed it. So in any event, we just wanted to get that in the record. So thank you. Okay, so we'll reclose item number 5. We've closed item number 6. So we're done with our public hearings. So now we can go back and see if we can act on any of the public hearings that we considered. The first, so going back to the top of the agenda, that's the first two applications were the Beacon Road elderly apartment ones. And perhaps, McKeel, you could pull up your staff recommendation for that, and then we can have a discussion by the commission. Again, this was it's the 22 we had originally, way back when, I think Joe Viozzo and I were probably around, I'm not sure who else was, we approved it as an open space subdivision. And then the proposal is they amended the regulations to allow elderly developments in this area. And so they're coming in, I guess, and they appear to conform to regulations. And McKeel, were there any particular issues? I think you tweaked a few of the conditions.
Correct. Just to run through them real quickly, just to make sure that the prior development, whatever was recorded, is removed or amended to allow this 22 age restricted development. The possession of the ownership of the open space needs to be addressed. That by having them come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission to review it. And then the erosion controls are standard boilerplate language. There needs to be a final agreement with WPCA in order to get building permit. Also, the pickleball port needs to be designed to address noise mitigation before a building permit is issued, and then standard lighting conditions.
Okay, let's just go around. Joe Chadwick, thoughts?
I've got no real issues with this. Yeah, all the open things are really, a burden of administrative nature. But
right.
As far as the basic design and where they're going with it, it's a huge amount of fill to have to take off the site, but they would have probably had to do that with the previous scheme anyway.
Right. Thanks, Joe. Fred?
All I would say is that it's almost premature to decide, because isn't it all dependent upon the sewers being hooked up? Did we ever get any information that was going to happen or when it's going to happen? I don't know why we would.
Yeah, so there have been preliminary discussions, and there's the attorneys for the town and attorney for the applicant they just need to come up with the agreement. Part of that also is how much the applicant is going to contribute to the extension. The reason why it's a question of how much is the extension is being rerouted at the request of the town, so that it can serve the other property owners on Rose Hill Drive, and so there needs to be some sort of cost share determined and figured out. But their project can't happen without sewers, so without an agreement, they really won't be able to move forward.
Well, okay, with those two major hypotheticals, what could we possibly vote on? We'll vote on something that we don't even know can happen. This project may fall apart on its own, from its own volition. That
is a risk. I will say that the condition about the WPCA requirements have been cleared by the town engineer as well as the town attorney, so they're comfortable with it.
But that doesn't mean it's going to be done. I mean, they may have the authorization to do it. I mean, I know that, like, the town has the authorization to buy that property but it hasn't happened yet. So I don't know. I just feel like we're almost being premature to decide on this. Why wouldn't they get at least if they were digging the ground to put sewers in, at least we have something that's substantial. But I don't know. I think we're voting on something that doesn't even exist, actually. We could vote on, and then what? Just like the last time, 5 years go by and they come back with another one and another one. I think we should have more definitive commitment from saying they're going to do it. That's fine. That could be 10 years from now. I don't know why we would vote on it or talk about it today. That's just my opinion.
Fred, I go by you, so I think what was mentioned in the last proposal was that the town couldn't do it without this project. And so it's like a catch-22 situation. You know, the town may want to do it, but can't do it without this project coming in and helping in the donation to pay for this, because now the density will be big enough to make it worthwhile. I think
but Joe, does that have to be worked out first? You know, the money
I
part
think
of
it is worked out. Just that if they have an approval first, then at least they got something already approved that they can say, all right, now we got the proof. Now we need the town approval to make it go through. And neither one of them is going to go through unless they both agree.
Right.
So something has to give first, I think.
Yeah, to follow up on Joe Vayuso's comments, in a very large development project like this, it tends to be a process of walking around in a circle until you get to the middle. And you pick up a piece of paper that is an approval or a representation from one agency that you've got support. And you can use that to walk to another agency and say, look, we've got this support, we've got this level of compliance. So that would be helpful to give them confidence to move forward with their portion of an approval. And you sort of just keep going around in this circle until you get to the middle, picking up pieces of paper and approvals. And this is really a fundamental step for getting that acknowledgement that this is an approvable project. So that's why it's important for planning and zoning to act at this stage of the process, so that the next stage will be enabled to proceed with some level of confidence, because the sewer is not going to go ahead if it's a zoning non-compliant project. So there's an order of approvals that need to happen, and we are sort of first in line for that.
So let me ask you, so then if what you're saying is correct, then we technically can approve the project with a condition that the approval rests upon the town so in other words, what you're basically doing is saying, okay, we're going to leave the light green for the project to go through, but we're not going to, but unless you do your half, our half is to say we'll do it with a condition that you get the sewers. But I'm just thinking, are we doing this saying you've got our approval with no conditions? I don't think we have to have conditions. The condition being that
the applicant already stated that this project will not go forward without the sewers.
Right, Joe. So what I'm saying is, yeah, right. So what I'm saying is, just to clarify it on our end, that we can give a conditional approval, or an approval with a condition saying that this will only occur on our end as far as the approval once we know you have the commitment for the sewers. Say they kind of have the commitment, but they really are not doing it. It's not like they're working toward it. Just my thought. I don't know. Maybe if we got to, I don't know. I would just feel better if there was something more definitive on the part of the town and the thing. But if we have to say, yeah, okay, we like the plan, it looks good, we're willing to approve it. The only problem that we have with it is that it's not designed right now to be hooked up to sewers. There's no monetary commitment to hook it up to sewers. That's all I'm saying.
But it's not designed without the sewers. There's no design without the sewers. The condition will be no different than any other condition. This approval is based on sewer approval, or else it's not going to go through.
Right, that would be a condition then, right? But that would be a condition.
Engineering, whoever, on septic systems, because it can't handle that over there.
Correct.
So there's no... This thing is not going to go through unless the sewers are approved. The applicant approved it, and just common sense, this thing is not going to go through without sewers.
Right.
Okay. Thanks, Fred. Marcy, any thoughts?
No, I was unmuted. I'm sorry. I like that they were sensitive to the footprint that was previously approved. I like that. Let me think about this they gave back more open space than was donated. That it just seemed like it's a good balanced project. I like the look of the buildings. Don't feel overly huge, or, they're smaller 2, 3s, which I think fit, a good residential feel. And it's not it's not another huge, condo complex. It's a small active adult complex. And I mean, that to me is one of the, other than the sewers, the active adult aspect is a huge reason to improve it. It's just something we need so much in town, and we just don't have it. I see it all the time with the real estate. So I think it goes a long way to solving a lot of issues.
Thanks, Marcy. McKeel, and I'm good with it too. McKeel, the open space thing, what condition, is that in there? I think that's not in the one that was sent out.
The possession and ownership?
Yeah, who's going to get the open space? Yeah, that's at number 2. Okay.
Yep. It has to come back to the commission.
Great. Okay. Good enough. Then, and this is just for the special exception, not the 6.8 one, right?
Correct.
So we need a separate resolution for that one.
Well, I put the finding in.
Oh, did you put it in there?
Yeah.
Okay. Finds based on the grading is consistent. Okay, so this is a resolution that covers both the special exception for the 22 unit housing development and the 6.8. So this resolution covers applications 1 and 2, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Then, does someone want to make a motion to approve applications number 1 and 2 on our agenda, the special exception coastal site plan for the 22 unit housing development and the special exception for grading under 6.8 by adopting the findings and conditions that McKeel has set forth in the staff report that he is displaying in front of us?
Fred Russo make that the motion.
Fred makes the motion to approve. Is there a second?
Chadwick seconds.
Second, Joe Chadwick. Any further discussion? All in favor, Joe Chadwick.
Joe Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo.
Fred Russo is in favor.
Joe Vayuso.
Joe Vayuso in favor.
Marcy.
Marcy's in favor.
And Chair is also in favor. Okay, so that brings us then to item number 3. This is 42 Silver Street. We can have a discussion about that one. The issues, there were several neighbors in opposition, or some that had some concerns, and others had concerns, some that were addressed. At least I don't know whether they addressed everyone's satisfaction, but there was issues that we held the public hearing open, and then I believe there was some additional concerns raised for the first time this evening about the safety issues. So anyway, that's what the issues. Again, it's an existing 3. It's got 3 dwelling units, so they're adding 3. It's a significant addition, but it is a very larger lot, and it has an area in the back. But it is a significant addition, and there are questions about the parking, and we did, Mr. Peretti showed 3 additional on-site parking spaces, as well as 6 in the back. There were some landscaping issues that were out there, and he did submit some additional landscaping on those. And there were some drainage questions. Mr. Peretti went over that. Then the other concerns were about there were some notice issues about sending the certified mail out. I don't know if it's actually certified or it's just has to it's not actually, you have to sign for it, but there's something you could send out. There was the issue about the number of lots on a dead end street. So as that was there's sort of 2 safety issues. One is that there's 21 houses on this dead end street, and that is a safety issue. I think she cited a violation of subdivision regulations, but this isn't a subdivision. But there is a subdivision regulation that does have the length of a dead end street, but this is not under those regulations. And then there was a possible concern about the narrowness of the the driveway itself being 11 feet, and can you get emergency vehicles up in there? So that was raised. Although I don't think the fire chief had any comments on that particular issue, and he's going to review it in general. And then there's some concerns about emergency vehicle access, because it is a narrow street already, and can you get emergency vehicles up and down? And the general sense is that you got a lot of dwelling units on a dead end street now, and you're adding to that, and that could be a potential safety issue. So, whether or not it violates any regulations, anyway, that was the tenor of the opposition that I heard. So, let's go around and see what people think about this. Joe Chadwick, I have you at the top of my list all the time. I don't know if you like being going first, but
Alphabetical order. I've been the victim of that all my life.
Right.
Given the vigor of the concerns, I think it would behoove us to at least get an opinion from the fire marshal to give us some guidance on this. Even though the regulations do not strictly cover the substance of it, the practical application of a rescue situation really needs to be addressed by someone in the fire marshal's office. So I think we need a little guidance in order to proceed with this.
Okay, that's something we can do. We can certainly ask the fire marshal to look at this more closely and see if there are any safety concerns, either as to the number of houses, emergency access to the place itself or the driveway. And it's not evidence outside the record because they're town staff, so we can do that. So, Fred, what do you think?
Well, I actually live on a very narrow street as well. It's 17 feet wide. There's 33 families that live there, so I can understand the legitimate concerns that the property owner has concerning this application. I guess so, and so on that side, sort of my heart goes in that direction. Even having an Amazon truck on your street creates a problem. Okay, you can't get people by the street so narrow. There's not enough width to get any two vehicles side by side together. But I guess the only thing I would be concerned about is that even with those conditions, and I know what they are because I live under them every single day, why wasn't there, or why isn't there more opposition from the neighborhood? If there's 27 families or something like that, we have one person. I'm not sure if that one person is representing the entire neighborhood or representing herself. I don't know. It's just a legitimate question. But I know sometimes in the past when we've had strong opposition to something, it's with more than just a single neighbor coming in. If there were a half a dozen of them and they live kind of in different parts of the street, it kind of more legitimatizes the situation. So I think that, one side of me says, I know exactly what you're saying. I live on the same exact street. It drives me crazy at times. It's a one-way. There's no way out. There's no turnarounds. There's no nothing. And we have the same concern with fire and emergency vehicles. Snow plowing makes the street even more narrow. I get it. I would have liked to have seen more opposition, not because I want to see the opposition, but that the resident would have brought, property owner would have brought more opposition to the meeting. That's what I say. So I mean, to me, it seems like the regs, the applicant's not really going away from the regs. The regs say, I think, basically that he can do what he wants to do there, according to our regulations. But I don't see the strong opposition from anybody else except one individual at this point. And that I'm not lessening its value, not at all. I'm just saying that I think there's strength in numbers.
Thanks, Fred. There was in the initial public hearing, there was someone else who spoke. I think Miss Fiore spoke, but also someone. I had a Deborah Monaco also spoke.
That was the last time.
Yeah, the last time.
Yeah.
But they were different issues. Those were the ones she raised, particularly the parking, that stuff for sticking out, and that was the one of the main concern, and drainage, I think, were the
Right.
concerns that she raised. I think Ms. Fiore raised more of a general safety issue.
Right.
That was a more novel issue that she had raised. So, Joe Vayuso?
Yeah, I have a little bit of opinion on this too as well. Basically, I agree with Joe Chadwick in regards to possibly the fire marshal having some input on the smaller streets, but at the same time, if I'm hearing correctly, he approved another place where there was only 9 feet, and he says his trucks can get through that, and over here, the lady mentioned 11 feet or something. So yes, it might be tight, but you can get through. And like Fred, I live on a very narrow street myself. I think my street in the narrowest part is somewhere around 12 or 13 feet. And so we get by. You know, people get by somehow. So I'm and Fred raised a good point in regards to we really, you know, with the 21 houses there, we didn't really get that much opposition, you know, other than this one lady tonight. But basically, I think I'm going to go with what Fred goes. Even though I'm concerned about what the fire marshal says, I think he's not going to come up with a negative on this situation because it's existing. They're only adding 3 units on a rear lot somewhere. They're not doing anything, no major project. It's a smaller. So it's only one building, I think, or three units there on one. It's not going to change the neighborhood. It's not going to change the road. And they did make some changes at the curb cut in the front. So they did that as far as added 3 more spaces somewhere else. So personally, I think I'm gonna go with this, even though overall. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I should say I know there's 2 members of the public, the 2 people who spoke in opposition have raised their hand. I have to tell you that we cannot hear any additional information. We close the public hearing. We don't allow the applicant to speak to us again, and we don't allow the public either. So we're not being. That's the rules. That's the law. So we can't do that. So we're not ignoring you, but we can't hear additional input. That's so you're aware of that. Okay, so Joe, Marcy, thoughts?
Well, I'm glad that the spaces that were off the road have been moved. I think that was minimal. A parking space could be 9 by 18 on the small side or 10 by 20 on a full-size scale. So 11 feet is wider. It would be nice to see the driveway widen, but they do have that curb situation. I think as a good neighbor and, wanting to alleviate some of the concerns of the neighbors about getting any fire truck onto the property, and I think they're putting a galley system right there anyway, maybe grading out the lawn and that curb in a way to try to widen the driveway might be a suggestion. I don't know that we can really demand it, but that would be my neighborly suggestion. I do feel that the size of the buildings, their location is far away from the street. It's in the back. It's protected. I understand Jim's discussion of the drainage. So yes, maybe some of the lots next door or somewhere else are not draining into that wetland and affecting something downstream, but I don't see it happening from this lot necessarily. And you're not increasing the rate of flow off the lot on any project because that's just how engineering works. So I have to trust those numbers. I'm glad he came back with planting. I didn't get a chance to really read it on the plan, but I do think that he's adding coverage and creating all that. The issues of safety along the street. I get it. They feel like there's too many houses there. They feel like after whatever this latest incident was, that they were blocked from getting out of the street. I really don't have the, my question would be, as Joe said, to defer to what the fire commission says about access, and when that happens, I would want to defer to them, and I would want to defer to, a transportation engineer to understand, how much traffic is really going on a street from 21 houses and cars on a regular basis. Yes, in the morning they're all trying to leave, and in the evening they're all coming back. I don't know that I've ever seen, a bottleneck of cars waiting to get onto Ivy Street off of Silver Street. So that's a hard thing for me to really address from a standpoint and fully deny somebody the right to follow, what's kind of rightfully allowed under zoning. So that's kind of where I sit as I think about this. I almost really don't want to make a decision, and I want to get a little more information. So.
Well, I think the issue is whether we want to vote on this evening, or do we want to get some further comments from the fire marshal about the safety aspects. So in which case, we've closed the public hearing. And by the way, please don't use the chat to give us additional public comment. We don't allow, just like we don't allow verbal comments, we don't allow stuff coming in through the chat either. So, and we don't allow it from either the applicant or the public. It's simply, we can talk to our town employees, but not, the public hearing's closed on this. So what's the sense of that? Joe Chadwick, that was your, maybe Joe and Marcy kind of think, well, maybe we'll check with them, or, they haven't said anything. They did some cursory review, but perhaps we look at it again. What do you,
I think we should look at it again.
okay, so let's defer this one. Let's just
I agree.
not vote on this one.
I agree.
Okay.
Let's give the residents the benefit of the doubt.
Right. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll defer to the fire marshal. McKeel, can you get this and Dan, get this to the fire marshal, have it review. If they want to view the hearing, that's fine. It's on, it's on BCTV. And so if they have any questions about what the specific concerns were, but I know what they are. It's the width of the street and the fact of, it's a dead end. So there's only, what if the end gets blocked and you're putting, is the addition of 3 additional dwelling units, does that present a safety issue for a dead end street? I don't know if there's anything in the fire code that addresses that. But let's give it the benefit and see what it says. Okay. So that means we're not going to vote on that one. So we'll bounce that to the next meeting. So is that
we'll
okay?
need to make a decision at the next meeting unless we get extension.
Okay. It's 35 days after the close of the hearing, right?
Oh, all right, we closed it. Yeah.
It's 65 days after.
For some reason, I thought that the hearing was still open.
Yeah, no, we just closed the hearing, so we actually have 2 months to decide it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we got plenty of time. Okay, so that's number 3. For number, I think we've kept the hearing open for the landscape regulations, so that's to a month. So that's what we're doing with that one. And the team will meet in the meantime. And then let's pick up number 5, which is 10 Montgomery Parkway. And maybe Dan, you can pull up. There was no public. Oh, there was one comment on that. There was one concern that we read into the record. A neighbor who had a concern, but I don't. It didn't seem. I think there's flooding in basements, but this didn't. This didn't appear to make the situation any worse or address that.
Yeah, there were no issues raised from the town engineer.
Right. Okay. The town engineer would typically raise the flooding issue. Okay. And Dan, thanks for putting in the affordability thing. It says one of the proposed dwelling units. There is, isn't there only one accessory proposed, right?
That's correct. You just
okay,
do.
Right. The accessory dwelling unit. Yeah. Just pinch hit that for that. Right. And then change to allow the affordable units, unit, I guess singular.
How about that?
Okay, I think that probably does it, right?
I think so.
Yeah, that looks pretty good.
Can someone move Fred?
Well, is that correct that 5.7G3 requirement housing district generally noted in section 5.7, is that a correct reference? I mean, I just don't know. We pulled this from somewhere.
It's our boilerplate language.
Dan?
McKeel. Yes.
Often in the ones that I have been reading a lot recently, that deed restriction needs to be on the land record prior to getting the permit. So you may want to add that.
Sure.
And I can get you the language from many of the other special exceptions that I've got laying around my desk.
Accessory.
Okay.
To be filed on land record. Of zoning. Okay. These are our findings and conditions.
Okay. I think that section is referencing the incentive housing zone, which has an affordability element in it. So that's probably good. Okay. Even though accessory apartments also has, it's a separate section, but it just says they got to be affordable under 830G. So it's probably good. Okay, then. Any questions or comments from anyone? If not, does someone make a motion to approve the application by adopting the findings and conditions that's set forth in the report as amended by Dan that's presented before us right now?
Chadwick makes that motion.
Motion approved by Joe Chadwick. Is there a second? Somebody second it? Okay, somebody seconded it. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Joe Chadwick?
Joe Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo?
Fred Russo is in favor.
Joe Vayuso?
Joe Vayuso in favor.
Marcy?
In favor.
And the chair is also in favor. Okay, so that brings us then to item number 6, which is also a special exception and a new single-family home. Have you pulled that one up?
I have it right here. I just switched over to it. Yep.
Okay. And you'll make that change, right? Change it from.
Yep.
To take the S off of units on the in the second line.
Good catch.
Okay.
And yep, accessory.
Okay, if someone want to make a motion to approve this application with the findings and conditions as presented in Dan's report as amended, he's showing us right now.
Fred Russo will make that motion.
Motion to approve by Fred. Is there a second?
Chadwick seconds.
Second, Joe Chadwick. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Joe Chadwick?
Joe Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo?
Fred Russo is in favor.
Joe Vayuso?
Joe Vayuso in favor.
Marcy?
Marcy's in favor.
And chair is also in favor. Okay, so moving on our agenda, I think that's it. No old business, no new business. Approval of minutes from our January 22, 2026 meeting. They were sent out. And I don't know if people had a chance to review those. If not, does someone want to make a motion with respect to the January 22, 2026 minutes.
Chadwick moves to approve.
Motion to approve those minutes by Joe Chadwick. Is there a second?
Joe Vayuso seconds.
Second by Joe Vayuso. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Joe Chadwick.
Joe Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo.
In favor.
Joe Vayuso.
Joe Vayuso in favor.
Marcy.
Marcy's in favor.
Chair is also in favor. Okay. Correspondence. Anything, McKeel?
No correspondence.
Okay. Other business. We have a few bond releases.
Yes.
You want to review those with us?
Yep. Really quickly, the first bond release, no action is required from the commission. It's actually under 5,000, so we can handle that by the CEO. 23 Prospect Hill Road is a $10,000 bond that we can release. 31 Ferry Lane is a $54,000 bond that we request that be released. And if you have questions, you don't.
Heather, you're muted.
All right, sorry.
He could hear me. No, on 31 Ferry Lane, I do not request that. I'd say I wasn't part of the staff during the time that the project had been applied for, or at any point during the construction. It was a large, complex project and lots of concerns during the course of the project and changes. So while Mr. Rose, who requested it, did offer to escort me around the property, it's currently covered in snow and I haven't had time to review the file. So I'd like to put that off until spring and or at least when the snow has stopped and I have a chance to analyze and synthesize what's actually going on there. But yes.
Okay. So we'll withdraw that one from the agenda, 31 Ferry Lane. No bond release on that one.
We'll come
the
back
request
soon.
has been filed, but we're not ready to act on it.
Right.
Okay, so for 23 Prospect Hill Road, you are good with that one?
Yes, absolutely.
What was the bond for and what are we releasing?
To have all the earth disturbed during the process of construction, ergo the lawn, fully vegetated, and the driveway paving as per the approved site plan. And those things have been done.
How much is it?
$10,000. Yeah.
Okay.
It's also not.
Okay, does someone want to move to release the bond for 23 Prospect Hill Road for the earth removal of $10,000 and other site construction as per the recommendation by our zoning enforcement officer?
Fred Russo will make that motion.
Motion by Fred. Is there a second?
Second.
We'll give it to Joe Chadwick. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Joe Chadwick?
Joe Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo?
Fred Russo's in favor.
Joe Vayuso?
Vayuso in favor.
Marcy?
Marcy's in favor.
And Chair's also in favor. Planners report.
I'm going to share my screen real quick and I will try and be efficient. Just an update on our 8 initiatives: coastal management, open space, transit-oriented development, form-based zoning, infill development, housing, proactive code enforcement, and town center. We are continuing to make progress and are deep in the stakeholder phases of most of these projects. What I want to share tonight on these projects is one, on transit-oriented development. Branford is going to have a RTM public hearing February 11th at 8 p.m. to opt in to become a member of the Connecticut Municipal Development Authority. So this is a new quasi-public agency that has been created and funded by the state to support development around specifically train stations initially, but also looking more specifically at town centers and how that can be supported with technical assistance from them as well as grants and financing through them. In order to have access to even the technical assistance, you need to become a member, and that's what this opt-in resolution's regarding. And that will definitely kick off some more work for the Planning and Zoning Commission on how in order to be able to access the funding, you then need to set up districts and we'll dive more into that when we have the time. But really quickly, here's a map of Connecticut with all the towns that have opted in already. Specifically, Guilford, our neighbor to the east, is a member of this organization. Now, moving forward, also why that's sort of important is that HB 8002, the housing bill, Connecticut is going to be coming, starting to see certain sections take effect July 1st. The first is that there's going to be a requirement to allow residential buildings with not less than 2 dwelling units and not more than 9 dwelling units to be allowed in commercial zones. So the map here is all the commercial zones, sort of the broad interpretation of the commercial zones. So the BC, BR, BL, the BL, HD. I threw in the PDDs just because they tend to be mixed use and might be considered commercial under this regulation. And I also, the 2 zones where we encourage housing through the age restricted and the IHOD zone. So the shaded red areas are where that could take effect. So we're going to have to do some, we're going to have to look and see what the impact will be and whether or not we need to make any changes or clarify things in our regulations to be ready for this to take effect July 1st. A little more in-depth information, but I wanted to make you aware of that so you guys can at least start thinking about it and not be caught off guard as this moves forward. The other thing that starts is Branford must, is that for 16 units or less, municipalities are going to be prohibited from enforcing minimum parking requirements. That takes effect July 1st as well. And then the other item that we need to do is we have a long time horizon is by June 1st, 2029. Branford needs to adopt a housing growth plan. We either need to opt into the region with SCROG, or we can opt to develop our own. And then, so the housing growth plan, just looking forward. So we have the half mile around the train station, and then I've put together our commercial districts plus our more dense residential districts, and this is where the map looks like. Ideally, I want to start thinking with the commission about whether or not this is where we want to locate housing growth. Or where do we want to put it? So we're gonna have to sort of dive into that over at some point. And with that, I think given the hour, I was gonna go into some parking stuff, but I can put that off to the next meeting. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you, McKeel. Just so everyone knows, I'm not going to be at the next meeting. I'm going to be on a boat in the Caribbean, I think. Some family vacation they got planned. So Fred, I think you're up.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know what the agenda looks like, but anyway.
How come you always tell me on Zoom?
Well, so yeah. I just let you know. I don't see a whole lot coming up, but
that's right. No
but
problem.
There's a few things. So anyone else have anything? If not, then does someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion. Fred Russo makes that motion to adjourn.
Fred makes a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Chadwick seconds.
Second, Joe Chadwick. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Joe Chadwick?
Chadwick in favor.
Fred Russo?
Fred Russo's in favor.
Joe Vayuso?
Joe in favor.
Marcy?
Marcy's in favor.
And Chair is also in favor. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks.
You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.